All right, and welcome back to another episode of Comic Banter. With me, as often, it is my comic Conrad, Victor Segura,
How's it going, guys?
and also in the studio, the digital studio today, is our sire in geekdom, one of the people who led us on the path to our comic wisdom, Douglas Barre.
I am the ancient mentor. Yes, I'm the ancient mentor. The call to adventure came, and they crossed the threshold, and there I was, sitting around, foisting comics on them.
Filling subscriptions, answering our inane questions of why are you holding it? Why are they upside down? Wouldn't it be easier? Go away, little one. I have duties to perform. So, yeah, Doug is actually a comic creator as well. He has done a few series, one of them being Defiance, as well as Mythstalkers from Image, and also working on his own series of stories from Chimerica Tales. And that's mainly, aside from that, I just know him from just going to the shop on a fairly regular basis as a kid and just learning everything I could.
Yeah. Yes, I knew Ken when he was a punk-ass kid.
And he's not talking about yesterday. He's talking about just prior to that, years ago.
Now he's a punk-ass adult.
Yeah, fair enough. There you go. So one thing we always try and do when we first start up is kind of get people's backgrounds in comics and how right now trading cards, because that's our focus. How do those trading cards come into your realm? How do they affect your collecting or even your reading at the time? Did they ever turn you on to new books or stuff like that?
Well, I'll go. I started at age 7, and I was a DC boy. So I was DC probably up until about 15 when I discovered Marvel. And most of my card collecting at the time were Star Wars cards, because you would get those and you would have to fit them all together to make the big pictures and just stickers that you could put on your notebooks and stuff. I didn't really do a lot with cards, especially comic cards, until they actually did the DC run of Cosmic Cards and the second run, which is, now I'm trying to point at my little tiny little name there, which is my frame. So honestly, when I came to cards, pretty much I knew the comics way before the cards. So,
gotcha. Yeah, and that's so with Marvel, since you came into them later. I mean, not to date you or anything, but at 15, where the cards weren't really up and going at that time. So
no, they didn't really have cards at that point. Even, I mean, you were looking at like 85, 86, which is probably when they were just about to start. I think they started in the late 80s, as I recall, because that was sort of when everything boomed. And I mean, most of the Marvel cards I have were the ones that came in that one summer of annuals where they decided they had already bought the trading card company. So they packed cards with each annual that came out that summer. And they were the worst cards because they were all the rookie characters. Because like the whole theme of annuals that summer was new characters that we're creating. And when you have the mandate to just every issue create a new character, all the characters you create are awful. So, I have things like cards for Annex and Bantam. And you're like,
oh my God.
These are not the characters you really want to, say, look, I've got a rookie Bantam card. the Battling Rooster character from Captain America Annual.
I have that Annex card myself.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, like those pack-ins. Those pack-ins were kind of great sometimes. Like I remember they had artificial. They had mass-produced animation cells, and they were really just acetate with art on it. But those were one of the ones too in that same time frame where they did Annex. I think months, like maybe the next year, they had those in there, and those were another thing that kind of kept. I was like, okay, this is a random thing, but I liked it. I thought it was cool.
And the idea would be like, oh, well, it's a rookie card, so, I've got it, and it's going to be valuable when the character is really popular and famous.
And the annual is the only thing they've ever been in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anix isn't popping up in too many Spider-Man video games right now, so he doesn't face Miles Morales. Although he could fit in the new game. Check it out, guys. It's really good. It's so much fun. You get to play as Miles Morales.
You're a commercial. It's just so funny.
I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Go out today and get it.
Follow the link in the description below. Every time you but yeah, so for you, the most part then would be what we've talked about a lot as well as Marvel Universe or the DC Who's Who, and those were kind of your chance to, if there was a character that you weren't collecting yet, you would find out about it there.
Oh yeah, the Marvel books were great for me because that was pretty much after I'd started with Marvel, and the DC books were for me very nostalgic. Like, okay, I recognize all of this. I know these characters, even if I haven't read them. I know about them because I've read all the little footnotes. But when the Marvel ones came out, and for me it was the revised edition, so not the first Ohatmu, but the second Ohatmu, and yeah, I poured through those things because it was like, all right, I don't even know who this is, and I'd read about it. I'd be like, Now I don't even need to read the comics. I just enjoyed reading the Ohatmu entries.
So good.
Nice.
In fact, when I was in the hospital in 2005, when I was first sick, Ken knows this, but I was really sick in the hospital for about 6 months at one point, and I literally had some of the 2005, 2006 Marvel handbook, and I'd be lying there, unable to do it, and I'd basically have my ex-wife at the time read me out of these, and she'd be reading these things. She'd be like, "Does this make any sense to you?" And I'm like, "Yes, it does."
It's music.
It was.
It truly is. I love those books.
Those are awesome. That's great to hear. I'm glad to hear that's the experience you've had with them, and of course, we've all been there. We're this is, but so he can electrify people, but only through their blood. What? And you're like, yes, that's his power. Don't you understand? He's Adam the Extreme. God, extreme. Yes, no E before it. It's extreme. That's
yes. They're bringing him back in the first issue of Marvel Legends. I'm like, didn't we resolve this plot line? They're like, no, we're just going to resolve it again.
And Victor and I were talking about that off air a little while back, because in the article you read, it says, oh yes, this is a story that's going to be in continuity. But then they also talk about how it's not in continuity. And I'm
it's the in continuity resolution of who the third Summers brother is, which we kind of found out 12 years ago. Was
yes. The Deadly Genesis, we already got this resolved, but apparently not resolved enough for some people.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of nuts stuff, let's just get into the cards and let's go into it. Let me see. This is always the fun part where I have to da-da-da-da. And starting us out, we left off last time with the X-Men Gold team. We'd go into different teams. This is X-Men Gold, which I think eventually would have Jubilee on it as well. One thing I liked about this card above some of the others was that this one on the floor actually has the X symbol. The other ones were just a blank square, and I thought that was a really nice touch that they brought that in on this.
Jubilee wasn't on X-Men Gold.
She wasn't. Oh, was she? Well, now I guess we'll touch on that in a bit. But I'm remembering that she showed up in an Uncanny X-Men, and that's why I'm thinking that.
Yeah, at one point, they try to keep them separated for a while, and then
then it got really homogenized. I was going to say, I'm trying to remember how they split blue and gold back in the day, and I'm thinking, did they really split it that much?
Honestly, I'd say maybe the first 6 to 10 issues.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you had Bishop in one thing and the Acolytes in the other, and that was pretty much the way I could.
Yeah, I think it was kind of around the time when certain creative teams started leading certain books that they kind of started. The new writers took over, and they kind of just started making a hodgepodge of teams. So the gold and blue didn't even matter at one point.
Yeah. They split them up only to bring them back together because there was a few adventures. There was the one in in New Orleans with Gambit, like, and Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and his ex-wife.
Yep.
Yeah,
Belladonna.
Belladonna. Yeah, and that took place during the Blue Team run.
Yep.
I remember that. Yeah.
And those like just after the introduction of Omega Red.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So that would mean we'd covered this a bit, but yeah, this team was really great. I enjoyed both runs of the X-Men at this time frame because it was just kind of, this was it when we started to get the cartoon. This is when X-Men was kind of in its prime. I mean, it's definitely had a lot of peaks, but this is, to me, is the X-Men prime era.
Well, and you had just lost Chris Claremont because he only did the first 3 of the Jim Lee book and left about the time Jim Lee did. And so you had John Byrne was scripting for a little bit, but it was primarily the artists were driving the story. And this was before you got Nicieza coming in on X-Men. But basically, it was the first time in 15 years that Claremont wasn't writing it. So the creative team sort of had this chance to do whatever they felt like. It wasn't quite so unified as it was before.
Yeah. And then Claremont, as we're talking just a little bit earlier about the Legends stuff, that they went back and did the X-Men Forever, where Claremont came back and said, these are the stories I was going to tell. And it's like, so he still got to take that extra bite at the apple.
Yeah. And then he's even coming back again now for his run on X-Men Legends. They were talking about to do a prequel to Days of Future Past. So he gets to dip in here and there to kind of tell his tale on what he wanted to tell before and have his little creative freedoms here and there.
Not to be confused with Gen Next, which was also a Claremont book.
God dang, yeah.
That like shot us in the future. Oh, man. We've got Critter Paladin in chats asking, was this before the book became editorial driven? I'd say yeah. I think because this was kind of one of the things that spurred that on was because when they lost the writer and then they lost the artist that were both driving forces at the time. I think that's when they kind of shifted to, okay, let's try and keep the reins on a little bit more. I don't know, Jen, would you agree?
And you started to have more of the editorially driven crossovers. I mean, when Claremont was on it and he was writing X-Men and New Mutants, and you had Simonson on X Factor. And so it was pretty much all just a couple of people working together. After Claremont left and everybody else was on it, and they made so many more books. This was the book boom, and you started getting all of the different teams and all of the extra spin-offs and all of that. So I think it became necessary for it to become more editorially driven just to have any sort of consistency in the line.
Yeah. That's hopefully that helps you, Marcus. Next up, we're going to jump into Excalibur by Tom Morgan. Drew this one for us. We were talking last time too about some of the characters. And it's like we have who we believe is named Charisse in here, as well as Nightcrawler, Megan, Phoenix or Rachel Gray, and Shadowcat. Yeah, this
Kylan,
is
Widget.
Kylan. Yep. You say Widget? Oh yeah, Widget's there too.
Widget's in the background. Yeah, he's phasing.
Yeah, phasing just behind him. So yeah, this was a book that I hadn't read too much of. I was aware of it. It was on my radar because if there was a crossover coming, you would at least know, okay, like, do I need to pick up this X book too? Yes or no? And yeah.
Usually you could get away without Excalibur because since it wasn't New York based, they could
over on its own. Yeah. And
this
was after I don't remember when Alan Davis left because they said this is Braddock Manor. I remember the lighthouse that they were living in when they first started out.
Was it the first time Alan Davis left or the second time? Because there was first time Alan Davis was doing it when Claremont was on, and Claremont wrote and Alan Davis drew it. Then he left for a while, but then he came back
and
to do a run that he wrote.
Right. Okay, that's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, which was like, I want to say like 30 through 50 or something around there. Like I thought his run was actually pretty strong.
I liked his run. That's the one I'm most fond of because I remember that one the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. Critter Paladin says, I always thought it was Sarais, but what did I know? I mean, for the most part, it's until you hear the creator say it or, in a movie, some of these names are just kind of like, it's Tyrion.
Well,
It's
it's
like,
also
no.
it's a color, and I think it's Charisse, but it's like
Charisse?
named after the color. So
Okay.
Well, let's just wait until they bring her into the MCU, and then we'll know for sure.
There you go.
How to say her name. Yeah.
That's a solid name. And she didn't appear in the animated series, so I didn't have that opportunity either. in X-Men Evolution or in X-Men Wolverine and the X-Men. Come on, guys, let's get this. Let's work on this.
looking it up and using a little link, it says Cerise.
Cerise. Okay, Cerise. We'll go with that. I'll try. I'll probably forget by the next show, but I'll be honest.
Because we probably had this discussion every time we brought the character up too.
Oh yeah. Oh, and something we mentioned on last time that I believe Kareem was commenting. Everything has. They don't call it like just the headquarters for the most part. This is Braddock Manor. It's like, oh, it's the stately Braddock Manor. It's very nice that they get to use his home.
Because weren't they in a lighthouse for a while?
Yeah,
They
that's
were.
what I was bringing up. I think this was after the lighthouse because I remember the lighthouse being earlier on.
Yeah, and I think you're right. The lighthouse blew up in the Alan Davis run.
Right. Yeah, I think like some of these characters, I'm trying to remember if they existed. I think they like Kylan. I think came in towards the end of Alan Davis's run.
Right.
And that's why I think this Braddock Manor takes place like after he was kind of like done with that book.
No.
What year? Now, tell me exactly what year were all these cards? I'm
This set is 1992.
92. Okay.
Yeah. All right, and moving on, we've got Fantastic Four by Paul Ryan, which
cool.
This is a good one. It's just the
and
Fantastic
thank God
Four.
Sue's in her actual outfit. What I was thinking is because I was looking as you gave me the list of like storylines, and I was seeing like that Johnny's married to a Skrull, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is the Tom DeFalco, Paul Ryan run. But is it the time when Sue had that abominable costume?
I think we're right before it.
Oh, thank God.
And we had the helmet on the thing.
Yeah. The helmet on the thing was okay, but that Sue costume was like, I mean.
And then they try to make up with it, like, okay, we'll give her full pants this time. It's like, no, just complete the costume. It's pointless. So
Yeah.
It was dumb.
If you're around, if you come back for the next series 4, I'll make sure that you're not there for the FF, even though I know you appreciate the FF.
Yeah, just block it out. Put a big black block over the screen for that. I mean, it's a costume so bad it looks like one of the like 1970s Dave Cockrum Legion of Superheroes costumes.
Yeah, totally.
Like where Cosmic Boy's costume was basically like a bustier.
Unfortunately, I don't have any images for the listeners right now. Just Google that.
Yeah,
just Google that. But by the way, you'll be put on a watch list, so keep that in mind. I've got Kareem on the chat saying, "Why not just call meeting places an HQ?" But this is Four Freedoms Plaza, not to be confused with the Baxter Building. This is Four Freedoms Plaza. Why would you meet in an HQ when you can meet in a plaza? Yeah, I don't know. It's really not my thing. Let's see.
And the sad thing is, it was a nice design. I don't know why they always wanted to go back to Baxter Building, because I was like, you actually have a good architectural design for this.
Yeah, it's iconic. You look up and you see it and you know. Critter Palette says, originally Excalibur was like She-Hulk and Justice League, a little bit of comedy with real superheroes. Definitely. That was, I think Doug and I have talked before about like what the better run is between the Peter David run and the John Byrne. I have my favorite. He has his, and we'll keep that. We'll keep that to another discussion.
Wait, on which run? On which?
On She-Hulk.
She-Hulk.
Well, personally, if you're talking She-Hulk for me, I'm gonna go with the Dan Slott run.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
Oh, nice. Very cool. All right, let's see. I think we've said all that we need to about Fantastic Four, and then moving on to X-Men Blue, and this is just great. And it's funny too because this one's Kirk Jarvinen, and I think the previous one was
one was as well.
Yeah.
But we didn't, because there's not enough space there to see that design. He doesn't bring the X back into the floor, and that's what I think was just a nice touch about that. It was like, oh, it brought it all together. Like if they would have had a 4 in the Fantastic Four one or something, like And he's just like, oh, I can work with this. I can use the space better.
Yeah, like all of Kirk's cards in this line, like the team cards, are probably my most memorable ones, like the gold and the blue team, and I think there's a few more cards, but I loved every card that he designed during the team section.
Yeah. I will say, as much as I like this card, I'm looking at it and it feels like, okay, he was looking at an Art Adams Wolverine.
I was just thinking the exact same thing. I'm like, that Wolverine looks like
pose and everything, yeah.
Art Adams cover.
Yeah, and that's the Jim Lee Psylocke.
If you look really tiny, it says after, and it lists the artists that he drew after. And then we didn't even get this headshot for Cyclops on his card, right? This is a brand new headshot.
Well, the headshot on the other one was a Storm headshot, so.
No, because in the previous cards, in the series, like if they reused a character later on, like if it was like a team up card or something like that, they would reuse the same headshot. And I think this is a brand new headshot for Cyclops. Like they did in his own individual card, they didn't use this headshot. So they had a brand new designed one. And I think, yeah, Ken's frozen.
We've lost Ken. we will plow on without him.
Yes, cards are not.
Of course, now we have these tiny little frames on the side with nothing in them.
You know, he's trying. He's working on it. He's figuring it out.
Well, the thing you said about the headshot was actually reminded me of like the, mid 80s Marvel upper left cover where they'd have the character headshots. And it used to drive me nuts that they just recycled them so constantly.
Oh yeah.
Like the few artists who would like actually do something interesting. Like I think the late on the Bill Mantlo Sal Buscema Hulk, they did a run where he had gotten his intelligence, and so he went and he was in a lab coat in the upper left. But then over the issues, the lab coat slowly tore away until he
turned like a little flip book, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
Although I would have like totally flipped out if someone had actually taken the comics and tried to flip them. I'd be like, oh my God, what are you doing to the spines of those things? This is what you get, Ken, when you leave us all alone.
I know. Random talks. Can you see? I could see the chat. Optimus Dixon. Comic Banter says this is hilarious.
Well, that's what we aim for.
Yeah. Quality.
See, now I can do some of this stuff.
And don't worry, guys. Ken's working on it. Why are Cyclops and Wolverine always on the same team? It's the conflict. That's it. They just they make good stories because of the conflict. Even Chris Claremont said that numerous times, that the two of them on a team are perfect because of how they bash against each other.
And as we know now that they're in a polycule.
Yeah. It's a whole different relationship now, but it still works.
Before we forget, Optimus Dixon is asking about Strong Guy. It wasn't that it was the dumber he got. It was basically like he would build up energy. And if he didn't expend it, like the energy would cause him pain. So he wasn't getting dumber. But there was a period in X Factor where Beast had been infected with something, and basically he was having that where Beast was getting dumber the stronger he got.
That's kind of like Maul from Wildcats. Every time he bulked up, like he was a highly intelligent character, but the more he bulked up, the more he lost his intelligence, and
Yeah, I
It
think
worked.
which was really interesting because I guess when Scott Lobdell was writing it, um, he did this thing where he basically shrank. He basically like diminished himself to get even smarter,
Oh,
which I was
that's
like,
right.
that was really kind of a cool.
Like he had like a kind of like they kind of kept his head bigger, but his body was a
Right,
little
but
more
his
shrunk.
body was like all twisted and wizened. Yeah.
That was really cool. I like that run. Like that was really cool that they did that. Let's
Since
see.
we've got the time, I've gone ahead and found a picture of that Cosmic Boy costume we were talking about. So this is basically the Cosmic Boy costume of that time. And
Wow,
you'd think it's like his old costume where it's like pink and black, but the pink part, no, that's just
that's
skin.
skin.
That's just bare skin. This is
Things that they thought up. Trying to see if we're seeing more comments from Ken to see what the status is. He's still working on it, I think. Man cleavage for all. That's entirely true. Doug, tell us about yourself. That's a comment in our.
about
You
myself.
got.
Um, like I say, I've been reading comics since 76, 77. And I read pretty much everything. It's people will be like, well, have your tastes or interests changed since you were 7 years old? No, pretty much. I'm still reading everything. All-time favorites are Grimjack. I love Grimjack. Grendel, Matt Wagner's Grendel.
Nice.
Um, really, like I say, I read all sorts of stuff. Let's see. Like Ken said, I wrote 2 comics back for Image back in the day, Defiance and Mythstalkers. Ken's rebooting here, so we're supposed to prep for the Serpent Society, which sadly I could probably name most of the members of the Serpent Society before he even puts the card up.
Oh, I remember. I would have saved this for when the card came up. But I remember when they were teasing Captain America: Civil War. Like Feige came out like during like a D23 event to say what the next slew of Marvel movies were going to be, and then he'd come out like the next Captain America movie is Captain America and the Serpent Society. And I actually got excited. I got
Yes,
really excited.
People joke about it, but it's I mean, it's one of those ideas that it was Mark Gruenwald, who was a huge continuity buff, back at Marvel, and the late Mark Gruenwald, who was really, I mean, people remember him for Squadron Supreme primarily, which was his breakout series. But he had a 10-year, like super long run on Captain America, from like 308 to like 450. 440 something. But anyway, Serpent Society is one of those things where he's like, we've got all these snake-based supervillains. Why don't they all team up? And you're like, and for like a 12-year-old, you're like, that's brilliant. Why have nobody ever thought to do that before? But then like you look at it closely and he actually did well with this, but you go, well, really, like how many of these characters would get along? And you have certain snake-based characters like Viper, who's not a team player and wouldn't be on a team of snake-based people. And like she's like, yeah, I'm basically coming in and I'm like betraying the Serpent Society and controlling them for my own ends. And
That's great. And then they had to turn around and tease us with the MCU, and then they said, no, it's going to be Civil War. But
Yeah, I kind of have to say that was probably the better choice.
it was. But as as a Marvel nerd, like I can't help but get really
Oh
excited
God,
for
yeah.
something like that. Like I'm like, oh, this is awesome! Like they're actually gonna do that. But oh well. I'm glad ultimately I'm glad they went with Civil War. It was still a good movie, but it'd been fun to see the Serpent Society on the big screen.
Yeah, even if it's just little nods to these things.
Yeah. Like was it Batroc on Winter Soldier when they had him at the beginning of the movie?
Batroc Philippe.
Philippe. Like I love that. Like the little nods that they do for the fans.
And it's great when they do a deep pull like that, and you're like, whoever
So
would have
perfect.
thought we'd be seeing Batroc in a movie? Like, all right, I
Yeah.
can see Iron Man and the Mandarin, and all right, Captain America, and he'll fight the Red Skull, but
Love
Batroc Philippe, that's just
when they do.
Yep, now I'm not even hearing you. Am I losing you or are you losing me? Everything has frozen. Perhaps I am the last one alive. Only I remain to tell the tale of comic banter. Yeah, really. I'm going to go check in the basement and see if everybody's doing okay down there. So, since we're still here, I'm going to go ahead and show you the really horrible Sue Richards costume that we were talking about never showing. As you can see, this is the mid-90s when the idea of bad girls were very popular. So you had things like the misguided idea of taking Sue Richard, who is pretty much the complete opposite of a bad girl in any way, and making that the costume. And now I live alone, standing here at the end of time, looking back over all the years of comic banter. We remember those fallen, Victor, Ken, all those who have come before. All that remains of them are these frames. We will leave them here as a memorial to their time. Wait!
Oh
Wait.
my heavens. That is the weirdest thing in the world. So hello everyone. Sorry for the outage. That was a very odd moment for us. My internet in Mission Viejo went out, and so that's where we got to hear. I'm going to get back into chat and hopefully catch up. I was somewhat on listening. Victor's frozen now as well. I'm trying to coordinate with him. If you'd like to go ahead and continue on your discussion of...
I was going to say, this was your secret plan just to get me to monologue, right?
There you go.
I will tell all my evil plans. Yes, I lured all the members of Comic Banter here so that they could give me this venue, and now I will take over for myself. All will be mine. I control all. Not that I have anything to do with all once I have control of it, but...
Oh, I'm sorry for the outage, everyone. We are just a bare bones. Like, this is one step above cable access, and if you are old enough to know what cable access is, you should watch Wayne's World because it's awesome. I don't know what to say. Or UHF. I think those are probably the two most prominent cable access based movies.
Yes, I would say if you were doing a cable access movie marathon, that and I would actually recommend Amazon Women on the Moon.
Okay, I didn't know that had. I've heard of the movie. I can't say that I am.
It's based on like what it was like watching like late night cable access movie nights where they'd like show like a bad 50s movie and then it'd be interspersed with like a host, and then you'd have like commercials for horrible things. But no, Amazon Women on the Moon is highly recommended.
Gotcha. Yes, and I'm not besmirching cable access. I'm just saying that it's dated. It's a dated reference.
Yes.
Critter Palisade and UHF, and of course Wayne's World, both are clearly right there. No number 4 cut out of the costume. Kids will love it. Exactly. That was their thought. They're like, we need to aim this towards kids, so let's go ahead and get
and like
this costume.
I can just imagine them sitting there going, is there some way we can put that little triangle in the middle and have it make sense? No, I guess not, but
let's see. Looks like we have, I'm assuming it was because all the pencilers had too many titles to work on, so they just dressed less clothing on the female characters to save time. That's what it is. It's like an animation thing, like, oh, I don't want to have to draw this much, so I'll just do this. But
well, that's like all the stories about like how, you know, artists used to draw Supergirl pretty much naked, and they assume the inkers would fix it.
The inkers and the colors, like, you guys handle this. This will be fine. Looks like Cream is spotting those rolling blackouts. Yeah, mine, I still had power, but my internet went out, and then it came back. So hence, I've returned. Let me see.
I'm on the East Coast, so when you fall into the ocean, I will just continue on my own.
You're not going to buy land from Lex Luthor? I mean, Donald Trump Jr. to just go and have beachfront property in Arizona?
Well, I might from Lex Luthor, but I wouldn't from Trump.
Yeah, fair enough. I can respect that. You have to have your scruples. I appreciate that.
Exactly. The devil you know.
Okay. Let's see. Now name the Serpent Society members and give their bios. Yeah, as I was jumping back and forth, I do know that you were mentioning how much you knew about the Serpent Society, but I didn't hear names.
All right, let's see how many I can remember. Obviously, you start with Sidewinder, who was the leader. He's the one who had teleporting cloak. You had Cottonmouth, who had the big extendable jaw. You had Diamondback, who became Captain America's girlfriend for a long time. You had Anaconda, who's the big one. I learned about her first in Ohatmu because she was in the A book. So before I actually read those, I said Cobra. Let's see. You had Puff Adder, was one of the later ones. You had Black Mamba. There was a third girl one. Black Mamba. It was Black Mamba, Diamondback, and
I'm thinking. I'm trying to remember because I'm thinking of her hero click. I have Optimus Dixon is still in there. No, not Kobe Black Mamba, but a different Black Mamba.
Yeah, there. Yeah. And then there was one she was like Egyptian looking and had crossed snakes around her bustier. I can picture her now. I'm trying to think. Let's see. Who else? Like I say, Viper was in there for a little bit. Constrictor was one of them.
There you go. If anyone in chat wants to help us out, we'll take it. Oh, there you go. Optimus Dixon. Eel.
Eel isn't a snake.
That's true, but I think Eel was part of the Serpent Society because we actually saw this. We did mention Constrictor. Serpentor was not a member.
Yeah, he was a member of Cobra, the G.I. Joe.
But he was a Marvel comic character. Let's note that.
Yes, he was created in the Marvel. That was like in the brief period of time, because when I joined Marvel, like I did try G.I. Joe before I sort of realized this has nothing to do with actual regular Marvel stuff. But I do remember the Serpentor, like they made him out of cloned DNA from all of history's greatest evil people, and you're like, why would you do that?
Is that your cat Moxie, by the way?
Yes, it's Moxie. Say hello, Moxie.
All right.
Yes.
Because evil gets bored. That's fair enough, Patrick. Fair enough.
Asp was one. Yeah, that's a good one.
There you go. We mentioned Sidewinder early on, but good pull with Asp. Good heavens, why is this? Oh, presenter view. There we go. We're finally getting stuff back up and running, folks.
Do we get the card? We can look on the
Yeah.
card and see who we missed.
We can. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do this. Bring in. Nope. Here we go. Doing like 5 things at once. Team, sorry for this. We're doing the show on the fly, folks. This is where.
That's not the Serpent Society.
No, I've got it. Essentially, it's whenever I reopen a presentation, it goes back to 1. So we start off with the Eric Larson Spider-Man, which is probably my favorite card from the whole set. But I'm a Spider-Man fan, so I'm already partial to it, and it's phenomenal. So there's that.
But he's not a serpent, so he doesn't.
He's not. He's not currently in our discussion of serpent societies.
He could be in the Spider Society.
If he could. Here we go. Serpent Society by Ron Lim, by the way. Always loving Ron Lim. Let's see. Hopefully everyone can see. All right, looks like
Death Adder. Death Adder was in there.
There you go. Eels a Rock as a solid comic book name from Kit Kurosawa. The actually made a reference to his icon for anyone who sees that. That is Eel O'Brien, also known as Plastic Man. Let's see. All right. I mean, also, hey, I will say this for Kareem, who's been holding out for this. It does just say Secret Headquarters, South Bronx. That's it. There's no. It's not like the. It's not the den. It's not. Trying to think of where do snakes stay? In like a hutch?
I don't know. In the thing in that tomb in Indiana Jones.
There you go. So they've just been called the tomb. Nest. There we go. See? So it's not even called the Nest, Kareem. It's called Secret Headquarters, South Bronx, New York.
Which, putting a picture of it and saying South Bronx really kind of exposes the secret guys. So
I say so. I mean, for those also, like I mentioned it earlier, I'm playing the new Miles Morales Spider-Man game on PS4. I'm curious if with this photo I could find it, because that is such a loving recreation of New York, and you're like, you can find so much stuff there and swing around. I'm like, I wonder if I can spot that building in New York. It's in the Bronx, right? Okay. Let's see. Oh, the snake hole.
But if you go and you do find it, they're gonna come for you.
There you go. So I'll stay away. Well, if I'm playing as Miles, I'm fine. All right. Let's see. I haven't heard. Victor is also restarting his system, so sorry for that, everyone. I'm jumping around.
Princess Python was in it for like the first issue, but her whole gimmick was that she had trained snakes, so they were like, she's too lame, and then like kicked her out.
There you go. Yeah, there was. I think that might have been. There's one that was called. Was there one just called Just Python?
I don't know.
Again, like my brain goes to the Hero Clicks and Burrow. There we go. Dixon's also got another good one. The Burrow. It could have been named the Burrow. They got it. They. This is 1993. I'm sorry, 1992. They didn't know about branding back then. It wasn't as big a deal now as it is now. So.
Well, maybe they were afraid it would get found, so they thought if they named it Secret Headquarters, people would like just look over it and ignore it, be like, "Oh, well, secret. Guess we don't know."
Yep. All right. Let's see. Okay, and let me see. I think we're going to go ahead and step forward, at least for the next card, while I text Victor and talk about Extinction Agenda. Cameron Hodge, which this is, so I heard you guys talking a little bit about the inset pictures in the back and what was going on there. And this one, it's interesting because the Cable picture is a new one. In some of them, they would reuse the image from the character cards, but that character card was by Mark Texieri. That's definitely not him. I believe this is probably a Kirk Jervinen, and that's Cameron Hodge, and they're both by him. I'm digging the art. It does have a bit of a Adam Hughes vibe. I'm sorry, Arthur Adams. Good heavens, folks! I'm sorry. I'm disheveled by everything.
And vastly different styles. Like, you're not going to confuse Arthur Adams and Adam Hughes.
No, I between the two though, I'm a bigger Arthur Adams fan than I am Adam Hughes. Not saying anything against the quality of either artist, but I just prefer Arthur Adams. I think there's so much time.
Depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking at like a big team page, I want Arthur Adams. But if you're looking at like a girl, Adam Hughes.
Yeah, but like the detail and time that Adam puts Art
Yes.
Adams puts into every, like, if you get to have him draw the thing, every rock is getting a little indentation and a little bit of gravel, and it's there.
Yeah, it's a sad thing we never saw like Art Adams like inked by George Perez or vice versa. Like that would have like imagine like taking the detail of one of them and then the other going over and being like, got to make it more detailed. You'd need microscope. Or you need reading glasses. I'll get my reading glasses.
Let's see. All right. So Critter Paladin says, agreed, Douglas. Victor is still rebooting. So yeah, we're going to jump in a little bit about Extinction Agenda. This is one of those events where it's like it definitely laid plans for stuff to keep coming back, because this is after the beheading of Cameron Hodge, and he's just a robot. He's leading the Redeemer, or is it the Redeemers at this point? I'm trying to remember.
I think it was still the Right.
Okay. And so he's leading them and trying to wipe out. This is also during the time frame where
this is the one that opens with Cable like assassinating Xavier, right?
I think so. Because this is the one that ends. I know it ends up in Genosha. Like that's the main. Yeah, Critter Palinson, was this Genosha? This one was Genosha. I've got to be honest. Sometimes.
You're right. I'm thinking Executioner's Song. They blur after a while because this was the era where they were really kind of really editorially pushed.
Yeah. And that's actually, I'm thinking about all the different ones that are, Extinction Agenda, Executioner's Song. There's another one too. I mean, there's at least two others that start with X that are along the same lines of like this giant event that happens together. I'm trying to see. Yeah, and I mean, Cameron Hodge was later on go to be part of. There's a few different stories that he took place with Nimrod and stuff, and also with the X-Men Academy that I really enjoyed. This one I didn't read myself. I just one of those ones where I learned more of it from the cartoon, because the cartoon definitely touched base on the idea of Genosha being taken over and them enslaving mutants and stuff.
Right. Critter Paladin's asking if this was before Blue and Gold, and I think he's right. This is before Blue and Gold. This is right. This was, I want to say, you're looking at Uncanny 270 to 272 or 273. So it's right before the whole story where they went into space with Jim Lee, and that's where they got Xavier back from the Starjammers, and then came back and had the Muir Island saga. So this was the crossover that happened right before that. So this was still actually in the Claremont era.
Yep. Yeah, sorry, I'm actually getting we have Victor in the blue room or the green room, and I'm trying to get him back in, folks. Let me see.
It used to be the blue room, but it moved so fast that the red shift turned it into the green room. A little science humor there for you. You're supposed to say very little science humor.
I enjoyed it. I'm just trying to get Victor in here so that we have. Let me see. And it is working. It's giving us the.
He's transformed into some sort of electron, free floating electron.
There you go. Got our branding back. We've got the comments. There's Victor.
It's almost like it never happened at all.
Oh, no. My failure is recorded in history, although now he may be frozen. Nope. Wait, no, we've got movement. He says, I got it. Snake. All right. Sorry, jumping around here. The Herald of Galactus is pleased that you remembered him. Redshift. What is Redshift one of the Heralds of Galactus?
There was a Herald of Galactus called Redshift. Very short-lived one. I think it was during that period where nobody really knew who was going to be the next Herald of Galactus. So people just started throwing heralds up on the wall to see who stuck. Because you had like Stardust and Redshift and
All right. Sorry about all that, folks. Victor is still getting a few things squared away. When he is ready, he's going to jump back in with us. Sorry, yes, about the bits of humor. I've been preoccupied. Let's see, snake eyes with an axe. Not sure what that means. All right, let me see. So we've got this is definitely fun art. It's interesting too because it's like you can see that he put the time in. He's got like all the different mechanical bits behind. Let me bring my pointer behind Wolverine here. You've got Psylocke. You've got Cable in it. He got a lot of he has a lot of art in there. He put in some time. I appreciate that. Let me see. All right. I think Victor's still getting caught up. All right. And let's see. Sorry for the dead air, folks. In the meantime, Doug, regale us of a tale from your
Dead Air. I think may have been one of those Galactus heralds we've all forgotten about. Tales of Yore. I've run out of skimpy costumes to show. So,
did you show off the one from Legionnaires?
I did. I showed the Cosmic Boy, and then I did show the Sue Richards.
Gotcha. Critter Palin's asking, what books did Kirk Drevinin work on? I don't know. He's been relegated to a lot of different books, or I'm sorry, different characters in the series. So I'm not sure what he was attributed to, but yeah,
there were a couple of those sort of like semi thought to be hot artists, like in the early 90s, who like did a bunch of pinup work, but never really got a regular book. And I'm trying to think of who the other one that I was thinking of is. They used to do, they did the art for a bag at Fat Moose Comics up in New Jersey, which is where I first remembered them. But now I can't remember their name. What am I reading now that keeps me excited about comics? I'm really enjoying Kieran Gillen's Die. If you're at all a role-playing game person as well as a comic person, it's really like a terrific and good deep read. His stuff, it just constantly gets me excited. I just read the first issue of Crossover, the Donny Cates book, which I quite enjoyed. Let's see what else is. I'm surprisingly enjoying this whole Hickman, Hoxpox, Dawn of X stuff. I can't think of the last time I actually actively looked forward to reading X-Men books, like in an active way, but I'm really enjoying those. What else have I been ranting about lately, Violet? See, I know some of these things because it'll be like the things that I'm recommending to my girlfriend. So
see, that's hard because every time I talk to you, you're reading something different.
That's true. I do read pretty much everything. So I just went through a whole big Squirrel Girl renaissance over the last couple of years. Like Squirrel Girl was probably my biggest Marvel book in the last 5-10 years.
I remember you put up a pretty long Instagram. I don't know what to call it, deluge, if you will, of Squirrel Girl.
Squirrel Girl panels, yeah, because I did a reread of it and I did a panel for every one. And the great thing about it was that so many wonderful panels could be taken completely out of context that make no sense whatsoever.
That's awesome. So, folks, it looks like for the time being, Victor's not going to able to join back in. He's resetting once again, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. We're sorry for the time we lost. Hopefully, you've still enjoyed our comic banter. I hate to use it, but hey, you say the name of the show, you win the show. So here we are. Yeah, I think we've touched based on a lot of Extinction Agenda, and let's go ahead and move forward with the Evolutionary War. Again, another Kirk-driven in. This is one where it's like, this was before my time. Like this and a few of the other cards are events that I'm aware of, but not ones that I read
Well,
through.
they're not really like actual events. These were, these were done in the annuals. You're going to have Evolutionary War and you have Atlanta's Attacks, and they were both summer annual crossovers, which means that basically they only took place in the annuals of all the books. And they had sort of a through line of like telling the history of the High Evolutionary, but it was pretty much just one of those haphazard, like I'm pretty sure they must have had like, here's the premise of the thing, and they had like maybe a 1 paragraph summary of each of your books will have someone with the High Evolutionary evolving someone into something because his plan will be revealed at the end. And then like the whole story is entirely in the last issue, which was the Avengers annual, which starred none of the current Avengers at the time. It like had like Gilgamesh and Hercules and the Hulk, and none of them were actual regular. This is the Joe Fixit Hulk. And like it was basically, we want to have an event that doesn't actually impact any book being published. So they all took place in the annuals. They were all sort of weirdly self-contained, and the story was almost not a story.
Yeah, and that's kind of this. That's one of the things I remember about it, is just like it didn't have a lot of like. Nothing came of it afterwards. There wasn't like, oh, the repercussions were felt forever. It's like, no, I don't know. I mean, people would talk about it. They'd reference it. You'd have a little like blocks at the bottom of a corner box, just saying like that happened in this annual. But other than that, I don't remember it being too monumental.
There was a period of time, like when annuals first started coming back into prominence in like the mid 80s. Annuals were kind of like important things, and stories would cross over into and out of annuals. Like, like the Judas contract over in Teen Titans ended in Teen Titans Annual 3. It was like a big story ending because you'd move it into the annual. But by the late 80s and the early 90s, the idea of annuals, I guess, because I think they didn't get included in people's subscriptions, they didn't actually want annuals to impact the regular book. So they wanted annuals to be completely self-contained things. And you get something like this where they did Evolutionary War, where it's a giant crossover, but it only occurs in the annuals, and none of the regular books connect into or out of it at all.
Yeah. Jumping over to chat, we say, wait, is High Evolutionary just a skinless Reed Richards? It looks a little bit like that with that kind of square jaw on both sides, but I think that's just Kirk's art style that's kind of getting that us there. Did Art Adams do one of them? I think just out of
I want to say he did. I think he did the X-Men annual, because if I recall correctly, I want to say the one in the X-Men annual, it was Art Adams art, and it was in the Savage Land, and it had the Avengers enemy Terminus, and it had this guy Garrick, the Stonehead guy. And it was basically like one of those where, I think Claremont wrote it, Art Adams drew it, and it was his own story, and it was like barely connected to the Evolutionary War. It was like one of those where it's like, oh, well, yeah, here's a little touch of Evolutionary War in the annual that I had probably written and we had drawn most of like 2 months ago.
Nice. Critter Paladins mentions Spiky Thing. Yeah, this is one of those time periods where they were like, we don't know what to do with the Thing to spice things up. Let's make him spiky. Which I think this is also, was Spiky Thing before or after the Sharon thing, his girlfriend.
It was the same time as the Sharon thing. This was back in the Steve Englehart run from like 304 through 332 or something. And basically, even toward the end of his run, Steve Englehart, it was so editorially driven and that he took his name off of it and he used his pen name because he didn't want it associated with his work.
Gotcha. Dang, it's like the director's thing where they're like, oh, this is done by this director, and it's always attributed to them.
Alan Smithy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
Patrick says, High Evolutionary is the Colossus of Marvel super geniuses. Everyone says he is so smart, but then he just becomes the first bar other people have to jump over. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I since he's not like a mainstay character, I still think of other people to be far more intelligent. And as we move on, like we have power creep in the Marvel universe, so you're constantly seeing things being pushed further and further. So it's like I have to think of like these are the 5 most intelligent people in the world, and you've got Dr. Doom, Reed Richards. But then as time goes on, you always have power creep. So now it's like, oh well, Moon Girl's at the top, Amadeus Cho, and I'm like, where does that focus? But then you're like, oh well, I'm an expert in X, Y, or Z, while he's ABC. It's just a difference of specialties.
And we all know that power creep is actually the smartest super genius in the Marvel universe.
Yes,
but nobody wants to admit it because he's such a creep.
There you go. See? Again, names based on puns are probably the best names there are. Hence, Super Serpent Society. All right.
Well, that was like back in the old Rec Arts Comics days. There was someone who was talking about Suicide Squad, and they accidentally typoed it as Suicide Squid, and like it became this whole like long convoluted continuity of the adventures of Suicide Squid.
Marcus wants to know if Power Creep wasn't he a Herald of Galactus?
Yes.
Power Creep is on a lot of watch lists, according to Patrick. Definitely. All right, and we're jumping next to the Operation Galactic Storm. This is after the Kree Skrull War, when it's like this is another one where I didn't read it, but I've definitely tried to go back and get a better understanding of it. And it's essentially, it's somewhat name-wise, it's an homage, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word to use, to Operation Desert Storm.
Right.
And I'm like, that's an odd choice to be like, hey, we want to invoke all those feelings you have about Desert Storm and put them in a comic.
But at the time, Desert Storm wasn't like, universally abhorred. It was still sort of, it sounded cool, and you wanted to give a sense of something sounding like a war. You would go with it. And this one held up actually pretty well as stories go. There's a bit of fluff to it, like there are certainly issues, particularly in the early half, where it's just kind of like, well, this is the issue where Captain America fights one of the guys, and then it leads into the next thing, and you're like, that was it. But as stories go, it held up, and you still see people refer to it, and it still had some impact. So as some of these go, this one held up better, I think, than some of the others that we see on this list.
Gotcha. There's one thing that I remember when doing some research to understand it. There's a point essentially at which, kind of Game of Thronesy, I believe the Skrulls. Please correct me. The Skrulls have set up a device that's going to detonate and kill off all of the Kree, and the heroes stop it, but then the Supreme Intelligence still turns it back on and he's saying, I'm doing this to boost the evolution of the Kree race.
Right. Basically, the idea was that the Kree were pretty much, evolutionary dead ends. They were no longer going to evolve any further. And he thought that, basically this sort of, catastrophe kind of thing will spur on our evolution. And it was interesting because that was the thing that led in the end to the whole last issue, which I thought was the most compelling part of the story, which is where after the Supreme Intelligence has done this, there's this big fight among the Avengers as to whether or not they should kill the Supreme Intelligence for doing it.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like the last vote is left up to Cap, if I remember correctly. Like it's like half the team on one side, half the team on the other, and Cap's the deciding vote, and he just walks away.
Yeah, well, he votes not to do it, I think, and then Hawkeye goes ahead and does it anyway.
He's just like, well, I don't care. That's very much sounds like the type of Hawkeye we'd have in later series too, where it's just like, I'll draw the line. That's fine. I'm going to lead the Thunderbolts one day. Let's do this.
Wait, Hawkeye is disagreeing with Captain America? What is this madness?
Yep. So and then next up is an event that is remembered far more fondly, but not for the reasons you usually think. Secret War. It's large. The thing that I know most about this series is that it gave us the black costume for Spider-Man through the storyline, not through the creation. That's another story. But it also gave us the toy line from, I want to say, like the what started Marvel action figures after Mego had kind of died off a bit.
Yes. This was the big boom of Marvel action figures, and they all came with shields that had lenticular pictures on the shield, so that like if you rotated them, it was like they would, the characters would move slightly.
And Captain America came with a shield, but not his shield, just a shield of like Magneto in a car. Like,
yeah, it
I
was
don't know
like
why.
a shield with a picture of Captain America, and it had that great thing with the lenticular where you could scratch it and it would annoy like 20% of humankind, would be like, oh, stop making that noise.
Funny you should mention that right here. No, I'm kidding. I don't have it. But yeah, they went on later on to take some of the ideas as far as, so with the concept of this, the Beyonder, if I remember correctly, am I saying that? Yeah, okay,
Yep.
so it is the Beyonder. The Beyonder decides to just gather a bunch of people and make them battle it out. They did end up kind of adapting this in a few different versions of Spider-Man cartoons. They did it in the 90s for sure, and I believe the Ultimate Spider-Man also adapted the story. But you had like different people just kind of pulled out of wherever they were. You'd have, as the card shows, Doctor Doom, Absorbing Man, Dr. Octopus. They all pulled them from different areas and put them together on Battle World. And they're just like, and he's just like, just go fight each other, just beat each other up, and I want to watch this. And that was kind of the whole thing.
Pretty much the story, yeah. And strangely enough, for the story being nothing but we're going to drop you on a strange planet and have you fight each other, it actually ended up being much better written than it sounds like it would be for that. And I think that's why it was in some ways successful, because like I've seen events like that. Like this is the thing that I complain about, the Maximum Carnage event in the 90s, which some people remember fondly. And I swear to God, I was like, every single issue is there's a big fight. And the next issue, someone moves out and two more people move in and they fight. And it was just but in Secret Wars, you actually had like, well, which side is Magneto going to be on? And, and the villains are all plotting against each other, and Doctor Doom's trying to absorb power. And it actually had a bit of story to it.
Yeah. Optimus Dixon in the chat says, Secret Wars, Dr. Doom stole the power of Silver Surfer. Hulk held up a mountain, which I do remember that's one of those iconic moments that they somewhat, they actually gave that moment to Ant-Man in the Endgame movie. I'm like, oh, it felt bad because I'm like, but Hulk did hold up the building a bit for a moment, so that was there. And then Colossus fell in love with an alien. Great times.
Yeah, and Ben Grimm kept turning back human.
Oh, did that go back and forth at that time, or what was the?
Yeah.
He can control it.
Well, basically it happened randomly, but then at the end he decides to stay on the battle world because he feels like this is where I have a chance to maybe become human again. And that's when She-Hulk takes over in Fantastic Four.
Oh, that's awesome. That's one thing that I did not catch. There's also, then of course the mainstay that was one thing for me was the black suit costume, which Spider-Man thought was there was a machine there that would allow them to just fabricate their own costumes, but they kind of just said, oh, it's over there in the corner. And so Spider-Man walks over to it, and it was actually like essentially like a little, like it imprisoned the symbiote in that in a little sphere, and he's like, oh well, I'll make a costume. And it's a nod. It's interesting because it's actually similar to the character who's also introduced here, the second Spider-Woman, Julia Carpenter. Yeah, and so it's an homage to her suit too. It's an interesting kind of play there, and that's where we get the black suit costume.
The odd thing about some of these changes that happen in Secret Wars is, and this is I didn't start Marvel until after Secret Wars. In fact, I had people telling me about Secret Wars, and that was start of what got me interested in looking. But one of the interesting things is that in the continuity of the books, these changes happened at the beginning of Secret Wars. So, like, you have this issue where the characters go into this box, basically, disappear and reappear, and Spider-Man reappears in this costume, and She-Hulk appears with the Fantastic Four. But this is the same time as like issue 1 or 2 of Secret Wars, so we don't know why these changes have happened. They just have happened, and then we have to wait and read Secret Wars to find out how they happened.
Interesting. I knew about the black suit kind of showing up before the finale, but I didn't know like all the changes had happened at that time.
Mhm.
That's definitely cool. I mean, it's odd that they would have allowed that, but then again, it's events like that happen all the time now. Like we're always waiting, like, oh well, we can't get these books because editorial hasn't published out this one yet.
Exactly. So it was sort of nice to be able to think that, they knew ahead of time enough of what was going to happen that they could just keep the books running.
Yep. Patrick is saying, and that machine was created by Null 5 million years ago. Patrick is referencing a recent story arc where they're essentially rewriting the history of the symbiotes. That's how, by the way, that's how I say it, or symbiotes. But yeah, he's referencing that. Check it out. The recent storyline, I believe, was not Maximum
Absolute Carnage.
Absolute Carnage. Thank you. I kept thinking
into King in Black, which is next month.
There you go. And Patrick, yes, it was. This is when She-Hulk joined the FF. Good catch. All right. So next up is another X-Men event, X-Men Inferno, which is it's got the card art right there, Kark Drivinen. He's got his stuff up there. So this is after so good heavens, there's so many different things.
Yeah, I gotta say, with talking about the Kurt Jarvinen headshots, I now see that Jean Grey is apparently Reed Richards with a red mask and wig.
Fair enough. So this is after Jean had died and come back because Madeline Pryor was a clone made by Mr. Sinister that Cyclops had married, and then was turned like after Jean Grey came back, Cyclops left Madeline Pryor with their child, and so she's spurned, and she decides she makes a deal with how do you say his name? It's a weird spelling. Nastier. Thank you. Let's see. Jumping over to chat real quick. If ever Victor should be here to shit on Cyclops, yeah, I'm trying to do my best. This is some crap moves by Cyclops at this time. The fact that he's just like, oh well, this is my girlfriend. I dig her. I know I married you and had a child with you, but I'm out. And
my true love is back, and even though you look exactly like her, and that's probably why I married you, I'm going with her anyway.
Yeah. Oh man, Inferno. This is a weird time, and this is all Claremont, right?
Yeah.
So, and
he was trying to sort of, well, actually, it was Claremont and Louise Simonson, because at this point, Simonson was doing both X Factor and had taken over New Mutants, and this was sort of trying to resolve a lot of the Ilyana Rasputin stuff that they had been doing, with her losing her soul and the 5 blood gems. But because Simonson had sort of taken it over, it kind of got mixed in with all this other stuff that they were doing.
Yeah. Victor's in chat, folks. As you see, DJ Blue Lantern, Cyclops is the D-bag. As I definitely want to get that in there. Yeah, this is... Oh, and now it's just me. Hi, everyone. It's an interesting show tonight. I am sorry for everything that's been going on. I'm going to bring up a message from Critter Paladin. He is saying that... There we go.
That was me.
Yep. This is where we got Demo Goblin 2, right?
Yes. Oh God, Demo Goblin.
Is this so? Well, let's clarify, because there's the time period where Hobgoblin has made a deal with a demon, and is that when he makes the deal?
That wasn't the original Hobgoblin either.
Right, and that's comments, everybody.
That's actually the first Hobgoblin, who was not Ned Leeds, but was Roderick Kingsley, was no longer the Hobgoblin, and Jack-o'-lantern had become Hobgoblin, and he's the one who made the deal with the devil to become Demogoblin. Well, become the Hobgoblin who was half demon, but then at some point he realized and recanted, and had Demogoblin was the demon part that got split off of Hobgoblin.
Yeah, that's where I was gonna be like, and so that wasn't Jason Macendale or
Masondale.
Oh, Masondale. Yeah, and so there's that time period where Hobgoblin has that demon in him, and then when he splits off, that's when you get the creation of the name Demogoblin, and and lines get blurred, and that's why you have shows called Comic Banter, so we could decipher all this and be like, wow, this is weird and dumb. But
surprisingly, the Demogoblin story is less complicated than the Madeline Pryor story.
Yeah, very true. And Madeline Pryor still comes back like at random times. Like there's a time.
Can you imagine trying to explain Inferno to like somebody who wasn't a comic person?
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. That's the best word I can come up with. I can't. I'm without my partner Victor, so I'm less powerful. He is a Blue Lantern to my Green Lantern, so I'm boosted up when he's here, and I then empower him. Let's see. I love the Cyclops, but I can argue against him being a douche here. Yeah, he's not too great. Optimus Dixon, the 5 parts of Ileana Soul reminds me of Master Penundrum.
Pandemonium,
Pandemonium. Sorry.
From the West Coast Avengers, with the 5-pointed star and the 5 pieces of the soul. See, that's the kind of thing that Roy Thomas would have like looked at and gone like, "There's a connection here. I will write a 5-issue epic connecting these two things."
Keeping going with chats. Technically, everyone in the chat has been Hobgoblin at some point,
except for the people who have been Kang.
There you go. And that doesn't say. Even DJ Blue Lantern, DJ Blue Lantern's been both. That's the important thing there. The 5 parts of Ileana's Soul is definitely a movie Amy Adams got nominated and lost an Oscar for. I feel like that's a reference to something that I'm missing, and I'm sorry. Let me see. Optimus Dixon or Kareem saying you just got. Optimus Dixon, you just got to go with the obscure reference. Yeah, he's got some deep dives.
What are we here for if not the obscure references?
Absolutely. I mean, we want you to know when we're what to talk about when we're bringing up stuff like the Infinity Gauntlet, like just a completely
nobody's ever heard of that.
Yeah, it's a random story. I mean, you could probably pick it up in a 25-cent bin. It's not that important. It's just something to check out when you have time if you want to read a random story about Adam Warlock. I'm not sure who this is, and Thanos. It's a random story. Let's see. This Optimus Dixon says, "I know comics. I just don't know artists and writers." That's fair, as long as you can attribute them when you see him. Like, oh, I like this artist. He does good stuff. See, Patrick is saying at DG Blue Lantern is Kang Goblin. That's a sketch waiting to be made right there. So Infinity Gauntlet, this is obviously one of the big events that actually did have like lasting ramifications, and it kept coming back and in lots of fun ways. Also, because of this one, we got Infinity War, which took me into a wide variety of series where you would have all of these doppelgangers
that had nothing to do with anything except themselves.
Yeah, and it had the tie-ins, but it also had like the doppelgangers that we got for Spider-Man and all the Fantastic Four. That was what got me into reading other Marvel titles that I wasn't reading.
See, but that's okay. Some of these, I gotta say, the thing that got me, the first thing I read at Marvel was Secret Wars 2. And I followed Secret Wars 2 into all these books, and some of them stuck. So, even though you look and you're like, Secret Wars 2, oh my God, that's somebody's first thing.
Yep. Let's see. Kareem is saying they should have renamed the story to Adam Warlock as an a-hole who sacrifices heroes for kicks. You know what? I can agree with that. But then Patrick says, And they knew what they signed up for. I mean, did they? Did they know what they signed up for?
Well, I think they had some idea.
Fair enough.
Silver Surfer comes crashing into Doctor Strange's house and is like, "Everybody, we need to go stop Thanos." And everybody knew by this point Thanos was bad news. So I think they knew going into it.
Yeah. I'm not too sure. We're kind of just like going around the main crux of Infinity Gauntlet. Victor, is there anything that you wanted to jump in on? With
Yeah, so with the Extinction Agenda, I wanted to go back and no, I'm just kidding. No, I was just kidding. I'm just kidding.
What do you have to say about Cameron Hodge? We need to fill in.
He is just an asshole. That's it.
And Cyclops, what do you have anything for Cyclops?
I said it in the chat already. He's a D-bag.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
Even Chris Claremont said he was a D-bag during that one. So.
Yep.
One of several extended periods of time where Cyclops is a D-bag for a long.
Yes. This is like it's so funny reading his relationship with the current younger Cable and being more fatherly to this version and being more of a family man, and then like we have decades of him like having Rachel and Nate and Cable, like the older Cable in his life, but he never showed any leeway as far as being a father. But now he's a father.
He just needed the strength of a throuple to bring out that side of him.
Once he was no longer sublimating his,
once he could actually let himself out, let everything loose, he was more free to be a father, apparently.
Well, I think for years, the only characterization or like character development people could think of for Cyclops was, let's make him an asshole.
Yeah. And they kept on escalating that. Like, you kind of like, okay, with this, like, I know with
Schism.
That was kind of like the breaking point, because before that you got this really cool run of Cyclops becoming the Captain America of the mutant world, and that's what everyone needed. But then once Schism happened, like it was completely a different Cyclops. It was they pushed the level on him being a dick. And
when Wolverine is the nicer, gentler leader,
the voice of reason.
Yeah,
like the voice of reason is Wolverine, and this is my favorite character. Wolverine is my favorite character, but you have to say something's wrong when he's the voice of reason. Like he's the one watching over kids. Like there's a problem there, and I that's probably ultimately like I think Ken obviously knows it's like that's the point where I'm like, okay, there's no love for me and Cyclops anymore. Like I don't care about this character anymore. Before I loved the playful banter between him and Wolverine. I love the relationship between them, but like I'm just completely done with this character. They took him in a whole other direction. They kind of, in my opinion, they ruined the character. And it was unfortunate because I always had this playful like, oh, I don't like he's a nerd character. I don't care for him, but they just totally completely ruined the character after Schism. Like he wasn't the character I actually appreciated.
And sometimes once they do it, you can't get it back, regardless of what they do to try to write around it. I mean, this is the problem a lot of people have with Hank Pym. Is after the story where he hit the Wasp, like people are like, all right, we're done. We can't go back. We can't see him in the same way anymore. And I think they did some of this with Cyclops, making him so hard edge and so, militant that I think a lot of people were like, okay, I can't see him as good old Slim, who's our leader and hero. He's now.
I think that came. I'm sorry.
No, I felt like there was a happy medium for that, kind of during Morrison's and Whedon's run of X-Men. Like you had a kind of good happy medium of it's still Slim, but he's starting to be like the leader that the mutants need. And
but also then you have more of his adultery during the Morrison run.
Yeah, Morrison,
You know, where you're like,
of his history of that, which I mean that's totally like textbook Morrison right there. Like, and I love that. Like, it's needed in his type of writing, but it didn't like that. I don't think affected his leadership style. Like, once he just
no, it doesn't. It just makes him a normal guy that you understand.
yeah, it makes him human.
Yeah.
It makes him human. Like, the point, I think, for me, I think, yeah, definitely the case was when he became 100% militant. Like he just totally stopped caring about just like Xavier's dream of mutants and humans coexisting. He totally let go of that and totally accepted, like, no, mutants need to survive, and this is an army now.
Right.
And once he got to that point, he stopped being, to me, he stopped being Cyclops and he started being Magneto. And just totally took it away from me. Like, there's a lot of points in him being a leader that I love. I love seeing certain actions, like when during House of M, when they, like, the heroes started getting back their memories, and they're like, well, crap, we can't turn we can't give Captain America his memory back. He's had this happy life. We don't want to ruin that. And like the rest of them were like, oh no, we have someone else, the next best person in mind. And that was Cyclops. And he totally strategically, successfully planned, a way to get into Genosha and take down the people they thought they were going up against. And I love those moments like that, like where they find a way to make Cyclops stand out as a leader, like a peer to Captain America. I love those moments. But when he went completely militaristic, it totally took away from him. Like, he kind of ruined the character for me.
I think that divergence in the character starts with, or I should say, begins right after the storyline of the 12. Right after
he comes back and he's semi-possessed by Apocalypse.
Apocalypse, yeah. He has like the essence of him in his head. And that kind of leads into the Morrison run and why they kind of use it as an excuse for why he leans towards more darker angle. Yeah. But yeah,
but the problem you get with some of this is that you move away from what some people think of as hero. I mean, there's a lot of people who, growing up with X-Men, one of the things they would talk about is, well, we can't do this. This would make us no better than them. We won't drop to their level. We've got to maintain this moral high ground. And basically what Cyclops says at a certain point is, we don't care about the moral high ground so long as we succeed at what we're trying to do. And I think that's where
Which is surviving, though. Like, that's the level.
It is. But, but to some extent, that's what you're trained in reading comics, of looking at some of these people, like you say to yourself, Superman. Okay, Superman would never lose that high ground even to survive, because he would put, himself, he would find a way, or he would put himself, on the line before these other things or whatnot. And you have some people, you have Spider-Man with his great responsibility. I'm always going to be responsible. I'm not going to let anyone die, no matter who it is. I'm going to hold on to this moral, this ethic. And I think what a lot of people saw with that Cyclops is the ends justify the means. And I can, which is, as Victor was saying, which is Magneto's thing. Magneto is like, yeah, I want mutants to survive, and I'll, kill whoever I need to do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Superman would never snap someone's neck in the middle of a train station.
Unless directed by Snyder.
Never happened.
Never happened. Jumping around in chat because we're getting Cyclops is a victim of circumstance. Decades of fighting in war with your soul will turn you sour. It's like having your teammate lust after you, woman, and superhero racism. Give that man a break. Fair enough.
Nah, I'm okay. There's other mutants that decided not to resort to the same thing. So there you go.
And the strength of your conviction and the strength of your morals is only as strong as is as strong as what you stand against with it.
Yeah.
Electric Power Drill says Cyclops gets a bad rap. It's like some stories, and we talked about this on the last podcast. Everyone has their headcanon of a character. Like this is my perfect iteration.
Speaking of Heralds of Galactus, that's what headcanon has the big thing on his head, shoots the.
Can't wait for that Marvel Legend.
I'm down for that figure. I'll make room for it on the shelf. Toasterist says Devil's Advocate here, but in Scott's defense, he has the luxury of fatherhood now that he has an island paradise to chill at and not have to be dickbag messiah. That's
there's a whole council that's basically taken the responsibility off of his shoulders. It's Xavier's back, Magneto's with him. There's a whole council, not including Cyclops, that can totally take care of it. So obviously he has the ability to do it, but there was a time where he wasn't the military leader. Even
the times when he wasn't in that position, that he didn't really try hard.
Right, like we're look at Inferno. He wasn't the leader of the X-Men at the time. He was a leader of X Factor, which a 5-member team. He wasn't in charge of all mutantdom. So where's the responsibility there? Like, it doesn't matter.
He had left his wife and baby to do that.
Exactly. I honestly, you got to pick and choose, and like this like Cyclops he's one that's made one too many mistakes.
And on a metatextual level, obviously you have different writers writing him different ways, and some people are going to have him be a D-bag, and some people are going to have him be noble. But when we look at it in context of the character in the universe, we've got to figure out a way in our head to make all of these different perspectives fit into the same guy.
Yeah, very true. I'm totally with you. Like there's it always depends on what writer takes a hold of the character. There's been numerous writers, like Claremont's definitely one of them, that's written him as a very incredible, like a strong leader. And it makes you appreciate, it makes you love the character. It makes you it makes you understand why a lot of the X-Men look up to him and why they see him as such a strong leader. But there's other writers that like to give him this, D-bag aspect, and it's unfortunate.
Well, you look at any of the, you look at Hal Jordan, where you have this period where he goes bad and kills everybody, and then he comes back, but he's good because another writer comes along and goes, no, we like that guy being a good guy. And another one's like, no, we're going to have him be a bad guy.
And they push fantastic Green Lanterns who've bared the torch for the Green Lanterns to the side. Sorry, what was that? I switched off a little bit. Sorry.
Hashtag Ion.
There you go. Let's see. You can only push a person so far until there's no other option but violence. Patrick, that's definitely that's part of what they want for that story, is seeing how far they can push him, and they just push him to that point. Electric Power Drill. There's a lot of gray area. That's what's great about these characters. Absolutely. And
we can all have these opinions and be right for ourselves, Yeah. And our perspectives are going to play to this, and it's going to be different for everybody. I mean, there are people, I think, who saw the militant, Scott Summers as being like, all right, this is the Scott Summers we've been waiting for all this time.
Very true.
We've been waiting for the guy who, takes no prisoners and ends justify the means, that he will save mutant kind no matter what.
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, you're looking at the current state of the X-Men. Cyclops did it first by getting as many mutants as he can onto an island and organizing them. Like he did it first, and there's a lot of people that are going to appreciate that. I'm not one of them, obviously, but he did it though. Like he's the one that made an attempt and try to make it work. Obviously, it didn't, but you learn from it, and hopefully, apparently he did.
Yeah. Electric power drill, D-bag with noble intentions. Yeah, that's definitely the way it's going.
Yeah.
I was trying to explain Guy Gardner to my girlfriend, and that's pretty much what you got. You got D-bag with noble intentions.
It's surprising how many Green Lantern references are being made in this episode. With just the inclusion of Doug, we've now veered far over. Like, what's going on? This is channel drift, and we're not even there yet.
Gotta appreciate it.
Yep. Victor, when wasn't a militant leader, nothing. When he wasn't a militant leader, nothing got done. That's somewhat fair too, but that's also when he was leaving things up to Professor X, and nothing got done. So that's on Professor X a little bit too.
Yeah, very true.
What other characters have had to deal with leadership like that Cyclops has had to deal with? I'd say the first one off the top of my head is going to be Captain America. He's had to deal with it, but I'm not sure he's had
not to the degree.
Not to the degree, because usually Captain America is more working with a committee, leadership by committee, I feel, with the Avengers. I don't know if that's always been the case. I've been,
we were just talking about the Operation Galactic Storm, where he basically leaves the Avengers over this because they all sort of decide we're going to kill the, Supreme Intelligence. There's an issue of Captain America right after that. It's like the epilogue to Galactic Storm, where he tries to have this, this seminar at Avengers Mansion about ethics and superherodom, and nobody shows up. And he's like, forget this. Nobody's listening to me.
Yeah. We've got Optimus Dixon in chat saying Killmonger was right. He was just took the wrong approach. I'm sorry. This is 1992 Marvel Universe. Killmonger is a lame character and not at all the cool MCU version he would one day become. But yeah, to that point, you are correct. He had some good points. Let's see. Cream referring to Critter Paladin. The point was that Zod. Oh no, we're gonna keep going past the Superman stuff.
Yeah, don't even get me started.
Patrick, Wally West is playing a very tiny violin for Kyle. Yeah, Wally West has gotten even more so. He's gotten really beat up in DC. But we are verging far off topic when we're again talking about DC characters. But I love Wally. He is my favorite speedster as the Flash. Otherwise Impulse for days. Let's see. Captain America has never had to deal with racism, mutants. Yeah, that's fair. Captain America did never have to deal with
and that's kind of what I was alluding to when I said like it not to the scale that Cyclops has had to deal with it. Like after X-Men, Avengers versus X-Men, he felt the weight of what was happening between humans and mutants, and that's why he created the Uncanny Avengers. Still pales in comparison to what, by miles, like earthbound miles, compared to what Cyclops has had to deal with it. But Captain America understood what was going on and the problem that they faced. So,
Critter Paladin says
Captain America didn't deal with. Captain America just checked his white privilege.
yeah, basically.
Saying that Captain America dealt with Nazis, he did deal with them, but it wasn't the same. I say the closest Captain America comes to what Cyclops can with the mutant thing is more, at least a similar struggle, not the same, similar, is the nationalism that hits the country that he decides he's going to stop being Captain America. When he decides that he's going to step away and be like, no, this country is going in a way that I don't agree with, and so I can no longer hold that mantle. Yeah, that's the closest he's had to deal with that, and it's not the same struggle. It's just a different struggle, but it is not at all, because in the end he just steps away. He doesn't still have to bear that burden after that. So it's quite a different path to take of just like, oh, well, I'm just not going to deal with the guy. Sorry, I'm going to back out now. Enjoy. I'm nomad now. Woo. Yeah. This is
Dixon,
weird.
I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I'm just saying this is what Captain America. The closest Captain America got to actually understanding or dealing with it. I totally get your point. That's all I'm saying is the closer you could actually see, and Ken actually gave an even better point by saying the closest he even got, but he even left to avoid all of that. So he's never understood the actual level that all mutants have had to deal with, but he
understands it as an ally. He understands it as having. I mean, it's like basically what you do if you're a white person and you want to try to help with racism. I mean, no, you're never going to understand it like a black person would, but you can use your. You can listen, you can try to hear them and understand and I think that's what Captain America does, is he tries to listen and hear what the problems and complaints of the mutants are, and you see stories where he doesn't, and then he regrets not doing it.
Yeah.
Very true.
Let's see. Let's be honest. Cyclops was a privileged mutant. He wasn't a Nightcrawler beast. That's that. That's fair too. Like Cyclops did have white privileges as well. So there's that. But it's definitely this discussion is going way off topic. Inferno's a comic where demons.
And we had even passed Inferno.
Yeah, we came back because we had a discussion about Cyclops. Infinity Gauntlet, everyone, check it out. It's a fun comic. Based on movie off of it. Yep. Titan Privilege. Kree versus Skrull War. This is one of the seminal events that are just a constant touch point for Marvel to come back to. Sometimes in really great ways, sometimes in other ways. I actually didn't read Empire, the recent storyline that basically just jumps right off of this, but I was very familiar with the Young Avenger who was at the heart of it. Hulkling.
The Young Avengers stuff, part of it was good, but the rest of it was really pretty by the numbers wrote. Oh, look, here's the bad guys, and most of the time we just spend fighting them.
Yeah. I got nothing. I mean, the Kree Skrull War, do you have anything to add to this to talk about it? I'm very much on the outside of this one. I like a lot of the characters that essentially made appearances. Like in the card, we have Super Skrull, who's awesome. Ronan the Accuser, who would go on to different storylines that I would then follow.
Where's Rick Jones?
Well, you can't see Rick Jones because is it? Oh wait,
Rick Jones. See, this was the great question. It's like the French and Indian War, where you say who won the French and Indian War? Well, the British did. Well, this is like who won the Kree versus the Skrull War? Well, Rick Jones did.
Let's see. This goes way back to 1980. Is that when?
Oh,
no, it's 82.
Before that. Really? 82? That late?
Yeah, it says as told in Avengers 88 to 87. Here, let me try and get my pointer up.
No,
you can see...
I got to say that the Kree Skrull War, I think, was back in the 70s.
Okay.
I'm going to check this.
Go for it. I was just going off what's in the card. It says, I'm sorry. It says June 1971. Good God, Ken. Learn to read. June 1971, folks. Reading is fundamental.
Yeah, March 72 actually is what it says here. So the 71 may be the cover date, which is always 3 months off.
Let's see. Cream Anderson is saying Kree versus Skrull War is just a more explosive version of the Hatfields versus McCoys.
Very true.
I couldn't disagree with it. It's like who started the war? They started it, and then we just continued on.
But it became such an integral part of cosmic Marvel lore that, I mean, it took years before they did anything other than Krees and Skrulls.
And I mean, the Badoon and stuff like that were other. Actually, that was what I think was kind of interesting about the previous one of the Operation Galactic Storm is they brought the Shi'ar in together too. Like they kind of brought a lot of their cosmic universes together. This was just kind of like at the time, this is who we had, so this is what we did. I think we said it, and then Atlantis Attacks. This is one that I was just like.
This was another of those annual ones we were talking about earlier. This one had a little bit more in the way of storyline. Like somebody actually wrote a plot outline for this one. Okay. And so you get like 1 in 3 of the books actually advanced the story, but you of course had no idea which ones of those it would be. So
yeah. I didn't read it. I know this is one that's like it's I should have done my homework, but I didn't. Cream Anderson said I enjoyed this one. What was the crux of this one? What was the basic idea?
Oh, it had to do with the Serpent Crown. And in fact, the backup stories in all the annuals telling the history, like Roy Thomas would do these. He did for the High Evolutionary one, he did sort of the origin and history of the High Evolutionary. For this one, he did the history and origin of the Serpent Crown, which, has to do with like ancient Chthonic, the demon Chthon and the Atlanteans getting influenced by it and by the deviants, like all the deviants in Lemuria, like basically use the Atlanteans as pawns to, attack the surface world, but it was really a plot. And one of the deviants, Gower, you can see the little headshot there. Like he had like they were capturing all these Marvel women to be his 7 brides, basically. So there was stuff going on, and it actually had like a story arc to it. But again, it was entirely self-contained to the annuals and had no impact outside of them whatsoever.
Gotcha. Yeah. I would say one curious thing too is looking at this card. So Ron Lim drew it, and there's a gauntlet or glove on Beast's hand. Is that just an artistic choice, or was that something in the story that Beast had some kind of glove?
Oh, I don't even remember.
That's fine. I was just really curious. Cream says, "Yeah, really cool take on what happened to Atlantis." Gotcha. All right, so from there we end the wars, and then we jump into events. Which the first one is one that kind of keyed me into events that would go on in the Marvel universe. That it was just kind of like, oh, I didn't know that someone married a Skrull. And so to the story, there's a long-standing romance between Alicia Masters and Ben Grimm. And then at some point, and hopefully I'm telling the story right, and Doug or Victor's going to jump in and be like, aha, actually, she is replaced by a Skrull and then ends up having a romance with Johnny.
Yeah, basically, she's replaced by a Skrull. Continuity. I mean, now this was all retcon, but basically, after we talked about how Ben Grimm stayed on Battleworld in Secret Wars, well, when he was on Battleworld, he didn't come back, and during that period where he was replaced by She-Hulk, Alicia Masters, who no longer had Ben Grimm around, stayed in the book and ended up dating Johnny. And they got married, and that, of course, caused conflict with Ben, blah, blah, blah. But basically, when they decided that, well, nobody wants to read about a Human Torch being married, they wanted to retcon the marriage, and so they replaced her with a Skrull and said she was replaced by a Skrull, and she was going to infiltrate Ben Grimm, but then when Ben Grimm didn't come back, she had to figure out some other way to infiltrate the FF, so she just moved on to Johnny.
And this is something it's another one of the points where it does, like Elijah Laserfist, which is her name. I'm sorry, Lila Laserfist ends up being in a lot of different little. Anytime we have the Skrulls kind of pop up, they're like, we have a set number of kind of known Skrulls. There's like Pybok the Power Skrull, Klurt the Super Skrull, and Layla. And it's like she's always kind of like, oh, well, we've got her. We can throw her in the mix, and sometimes to good effect. And I remember, I think there was a storyline with her and She-Hulk, or maybe I'm misremembering.
No, that was a different Skrull.
Okay, because there's during Secret Invasion, there was a point where they're like, "Oh, she's a Skrull," and it's like, "No, I'm not." And I'm trying to remember what happened there.
There was another. There was a whole run on She-Hulk when Peter David did it after Dan Slott, where She-Hulk was a bounty hunter and her partner was a Skrull.
That's right. Okay, but the Skrull was left over from Secret Invasion.
It was a different Skrull. It wasn't Elijah.
Okay. And is it Lila or Elijah? Because on the card it says Elijah. Okay, I thought it was Elijah, but on the card it says Lila. So now I'm second guessing things. Yeah, but this is one of those cards that kind of like filled me in on the history of Marvel. I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't know this at all.
But also, you look at like in terms of milestones. I would not call this a milestone anymore. Like at the time, maybe they thought this is going to be a milestone. But like if you were to say to somebody, hey, did you know the Human Torch was married? They'd be like, who's the Human Torch?
He's played by Chris Evans. Come on. No, I'm sorry. That's the wrong Marvel kid. He's played by
wrong era.
Michael B. Jordan. Yeah, my bad. So this one's not a milestone. The next one though is constantly referenced.
Oh yeah,
and is a Days of Future Past. Drawn, by the way, I don't know who it's drawn by. There's no discerning art there. I don't know who that is, and I'm very curious.
I mean, it's after the John Byrne cover.
Yeah. So,
but I don't know that it is a reproduction of the John Byrne cover.
Yeah. I mean, this is a pretty. It's funny because it's like this story is regularly like brought up as like, oh, this is such a great story. It's 2 issues, and then they've built on it so much over time. But initially, it's 2 issues of a story of a cool kind of like what if would happen in the future kind of idea, but it never really comes to fruition until later on when we get like more of an idea. Although I do love that cover. It's iconic of having Wolverine protecting Kitty in front of that backdrop of all the different mutants that have been slain.
It's a great cover.
Yep.
Because it's filled with so much story, because you look at each picture and you're like, oh, what happened to them? What happened to them? And you're like picturing the story of each of those people.
Yep. And I love too that of all the pictures that are there, it's like Wolverine's has no mark over it because like we've never caught him. Like he's not slain, he's not apprehended. We can't get that Wolverine. Logan.
Yeah, to think it was only 2 issues, but they've gone back to this and like made reference into it and like extended upon it. Like, wasn't there the annual of sequels? Like, there's an annual, like a series of annuals that are a sequel to this, and now, like I referenced before, Claremont's going back to do a prequel.
Oh, there's been all sorts of sequels. Yeah. Well, you have to. And if you look at it in context, this is the best. This story happened pretty much right after the Dark Phoenix saga, which got so much attention, and everyone was like, "This is so great." So, like, everyone was looking at X-Men at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it's defined how like a lot of future storytelling is done nowadays, especially within the Marvel universe. And this is probably one of the stories I'm actually looking forward to in the new Marvel Legends series. I like that they're going back to it and they're doing a prequel to it, and Claremont's the one handling it. So I'm actually interested on seeing what they do with that. So, but every time they've gone back to it, I actually appreciate it. I love those annuals that they've done. There's like that small little like mini series back in the was it mid to late 90s that they did as a sequel to or like a semi prequel to this.
And there are lots of places like Morrison did one.
Mm-hmm.
And there are lots of stories that, you know, that even just sort of reference it in title or in theme, that we're going to like, all right, we're going to show another alternate future. We're going to show another alternate future. You know, it's sort of the one that broke the timeline as it is.
Yeah.
Yep. Next one is it's going to be favorite for at least 1 or 2 people in chat, called All Hulks Unite, which I don't know if it was called that. I mean, I'm aware of the story.
It was not called that.
It is a milestone, and the idea that essentially all of
do you want to know what the actual title of the story was?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was called Honey, I Shrunk the Hulk. Because it was, you know, basically head shrinking him to deal with his multiple personality.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's awesome.
The intern Doug, this is your first time. We make jokes about the interns who made these card sets. And while we appreciate many things about them, there are times where you're like, you didn't really like swing for the fences here. And I guess All Hulks Unite.
Well, the other one wouldn't have fit in their font in that little box on the side.
That's fair. So for those who are curious, this is the storyline where Doc Samson essentially speaks with Bruce Banner, the Hulk, and kind of gets them to come to an equilibrium. And this is where we get the first smart Hulk. That's not necessarily Joe Fixit. It's not the Savage. I mean, we have the imagery definitely helps us here. And we've got the Bruce Banner of it all. We have the Savage Hulk, and we have Joe Fixit. But this is the Professor Hulk. This is the smart Hulk.
The name of which Peter David hates, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, because see, his thought was that this is a synthesis, that this is a merging of the Hulks. But later on, Paul Jenkins, who goes back to the dissociative personality disorder, which at the time was called multiple personality disorder, basically says this isn't a merging. This is an actual separate alter of the Hulk. This isn't actually a merge. This is just another alter that Samson created, basically to try to take the best parts of the other, of Banner and the Hulk and Joe Fixit, and put them all into one.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that he didn't like that. That's an interesting turn. Yeah, this is the one where this is definitely a time period where he's working with the Pantheon. This is a time period where you'll see Hulk out there in bunny slippers. This is an interesting time to be a Hulk fan because he's just kind of like, no. Now I'm kind of he was stepping into a new era, and I definitely thought that was kind of cool. I enjoy a good Peter David story 99% of the time.
Well, Peter David's whole premise on the Hulk, and he wrote about this at one point. He said, basically, every 2 years, I wanted to change it up. And so every 2 years, I would do like a drastic shift in what the premise of the book was. So this was one, and then 2 years basically after this is the part where he joins the Pantheon and basically starts to lose control. 2 years after that, he leaves the Pantheon and goes to the part where when he hulks out, he reverts to the Banner form. So like if you look, basically every 2 years, there's sort of a shift in the central casting of the book, as it were.
Gotcha. We've got Critter Paladin in the chat saying that this is not the first Smart Hulk we've had. He said there's a Smart Hulk in the early 80s. I'm not familiar with that.
There was. But that was Banner's mind in the Hulk's body. That was actually Banner.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and to some extent, that was before we had any indication of it being a multiple personality issue. Back then, it was really that the Hulk was its own creature and Banner was a creature, and they switched, and he grew into one. But this was Banner's mind in the Hulk's body, basically. And basically ended up losing that when Nightmare drove him insane.
Gotcha. Next event we've got is the Dark Phoenix saga, which is funny because it's like we've gone from wars to saga, and I'm like, this is definitely a milestone, but like keeping the events kind of separated by two different names is kind of it's a curious design aspect. Dark Phoenix saga, of course, it's long spanning if you take into account the time that she spent with the Hellfire Club all the way through to the eventual attack on by the Shi'ar. It's a pretty massive event, and it took how long did that event go over? Like years?
8 issues.
8 issues?
8 issues, believe it or not.
That's crazy.
You talk about compressed storytelling. To go through all of that, and it feels like it's much longer because we're used to decompressed storytelling more now. But no, that all happened in 8 issues.
Wow, that's crazy. I clearly need to go back, take another look at this. This also was pretty well covered in the 90s X-Men cartoon. So if you've watched that, you have a fairly good snapshot of what happened. Yeah, Victor, anything for Dark Phoenix?
No, it's still to this day one of my favorite stories in all of X-Men history.
It shows you about X-Men that we have this milestone literally like 2 or 3 issues away from the other one we were just talking about.
Yeah, exactly. That one was 2 issues. This one's 8 issues. Like it was all compressed storytelling, but it's the impact of these stories being as short as they are so long felt.
Mm-hmm.
Like each of those stories unfortunately had like a movie made after them. That's how integral they were to the history of X-Men.
Some of them twice.
Yeah, they may not have been some of them may not have been great interpretations on the screen, but at least they were interpreted. Like the people behind the scenes knew that these are incredible stories, and these are stories that the fans love, and they even to this day, decades later, like they still hold a place in our hearts for how incredible that they were told, and how still we kind of like use like those stories as kind of like the level of like what we want our X-Men stories to be told.
Right. These are the big myths. These are the, Hercules and the 12 labors. And It's like, if you're going to tell the stories of X-Men, you got to tell the big stories.
Yeah, definitely.
Nobody is crying out to see the movie version of Extinction Agenda. Oh, that Cameron Hodge.
I've been waiting to see him on the big screen.
Oh, I can't argue at all with that. Let me see. Next up, we've got the Coming of Galactus, which is, I mean, this is, and by the card we've gone up and down about card artists. So I apologize. Steve Epping doing this one. This one's classic. This is 1966. This is how, like, rooted in the base of Marvel continuity of the Coming of Galactus and the Watcher. I think this is one of the earliest appearances of the Watcher as well.
Mm-hmm. It's not his first, but it's pretty
right.
early. And
yeah, it's pretty early on, and so it's like it's Galactus, and we learn who that is and who the Silver Surfer is, and what the ultimate nullifier is. I don't know, guys. You have
this is Lee and Kirby just firing on all cylinders, and what's astounding, like we were talking about the X-Men things. So you have this was 3 issues, 48, 49, 50. 51 was the issue with basically Ben Grimm, This Man, This Monster, which is a classic. Yeah. And then 52 is the introduction of the Black Panther. So, I mean, like, talking about milestones coming boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Like, this is just like practically every issue of FF at this point was just epic.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome.
That's really cool. I definitely want to jump back to catch something with comment on the Dark Phoenix saga. Critter Paladin's mentioning that this was back when deaths matters in comics. Yeah, I mean, it was early on in that era, but then also when you have the clone of Jean Grey popping up soon thereafter, it does undercut it a bit. But at the time, their deaths did have more of a lasting impact. But Jean Grey has always been a little bit of a question mark when it comes to death. So I agree, but with an asterisk, because comics. Let's see. That was years later. The clone of Jean Grey was years later.
Not that much later. I'm actually looking up dates right now because, as I recall, like, I was surprised years back when I actually looked at the dates. So X Factor Volume 1, Number 1 was February '86, and Uncanny 137
1980
is 8. I'm checking.
Okay, 6 years. That's some pretty long time in comics. That's
I mean,
that's fair.
It seems like it's much longer, doesn't it? Like, we feel like, Jean Grey was dead forever.
Yeah,
but 6 years is hardly anything compared to
Well, she had her longest stint of being dead from Morrison's run to her more recent resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
That's the longest time she's been gone. So.
At least for but that's not even counting the young version either. So, right?
Yeah, no, I'm not including that young version.
Yeah.
That doesn't
so
count.
It's like it's weird with comics. We have very skewed points of view, as Critter Paladin said too. I guess when you're younger, years seem longer, but still 6 years is still a decent amount of time. So that is fair. But it's just like our points of view are so skewed from what we.
Well, like, and also when you look at it as a percentage of the existence of the thing, all right, for us, okay, if you were reading New X-Men, right, and let's just talk about New X-Men, which starts in Giant Size X-Men 1 and then X-Men 94. So 94 to 137, you're looking at about 40 issues. So then she's dead for 137 to almost 201. That's more than like 150% of the entirety of New X-Men.
Yeah.
Whereas now, New X-Men, as we know it, has been around for 50 years almost. So the fact 6 years doesn't feel like anything. 6 years is like, that's nothing.
Yeah.
But as a percentage of what had been happening thus far.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Yep. And on the topic of deaths matter, the death of Gwen Stacy. This is, the timing and the discussion is right here. Gwen Stacy's death, and it's still, it's chronicled in movies. It's been done in other media.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a major turning point. This is definitely a milestone for comics and for Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, this is what many people believe is the last issue of the Silver Age. Silver Age dies with Gwen Stacy.
And then we get and then we go move into Bronze, correct?
Bronze Age, yep.
How long is Bronze? How is that? What is that?
It depends on who you ask. Generally, I think people consider Bronze going to the early to mid 80s. Pretty much, Bronze is over by the time of Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is 85. But I think people generally sort of start to figure around 83, 84.
Gotcha. Yeah, thank you. And then so jumping into this moment, she has stayed the main interpretation of Gwen Stacy has stayed dead since this. She's been cloned, and we've seen alternate universes, hence Spider Gwen, aka Spider Woman, aka Ghost Spider. And that's who we have now. So she is such a key character in the history, and she has such an iconic look that they do try and bring her back every so often. And this new interpretation is actually pretty great. But she's stayed dead, and there's one of those few characters who you can say that about now. Like the joke used to be Bucky and Uncle Ben. And
Bucky's got back.
Yeah. So this was already a point that had passed for me because it happened in 73. So I was already well past. My comic started with Mary Jane, so that she was always that character. I would know of her because of cards like this, but the death of Gwen Stacy was always something that was just in the past. So I had already moved. Then when I started, it was always Mary Jane.
Well, it's interesting because I actually, one of my first comics actually had was Amazing Spider-Man 143, and it's actually sort of vaguely apocryphal. It's before what I consider my first comic, which is Superman 303. But I think at some point I had that comic because when I went back years later and read the original Clone Saga in trade, there were panels in it that I was like, I've seen this. I know this panel. I know it deep in my bones the way I know some of these Superman things. So she was dead by the time I had started reading comics. And again, I didn't even start reading Marvel regularly until the mid 80s. And yet when I came on, I sort of always felt like, and obviously when I jumped on, I read a lot of old stuff. So I had read stories of Gwen Stacy, and she was the one who had always clicked for me. So even though I came on during the Mary Jane years, I still felt like, Gwen Stacy felt like the right person for me. I feel like this is one of those things that you can always get a good sense of a person by asking about who they believe Spider-Man's, best girlfriend was.
Harley Cooper.
I know people have told me Betty Brant, and I respect that. I'm like, all right, you come to me and you say Betty Brant, that tells me something about you. And
Kitty Pride. That's for you, Ken. That's all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love that. Yeah, and that's, I think it's been said that, if this is incorrect and please correct me, that Stan Lee has said that when he was writing, his intention was that it was going to be Gwen was the love of his life. But that obviously that had changed at some point due to editorial, but that was his initial intention.
Stan Lee wasn't writing when Gwen Stacy died. That was Jerry Conway.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so Stan had but the idea that they wouldn't have kept, even though that was his vision, they didn't keep to that. Right. I think that's kind of surprising. But it's telling stories and trying to create drama where you need to. So, because comics are just soap operas on paper. So
it's like we were talking about with the X-Men earlier. When Claremont left, suddenly people came in and had a chance to do stuff with X-Men that he wouldn't have let them, or he wouldn't have wanted them to do. Or he didn't imagine was the way it was. Admittedly, some of those things are good and some of those are bad. He kind of thought that Wolverine was going to be a mutated Wolverine, and, that Sabretooth was his father and things like that. So
Yeah. Jumping over to chat real quick. Critter Paladins mentions John DeWolf too, but not as iconic. Yeah, and I do appreciate too. We do get to see John DeWolf in a few different iterations. I think that we have John DeWolf in the Ultimate Universe, and I think that they did a good job with her character there too.
Yeah, I'm waiting for someone to come up and be like, I remember those great days when he was dating Deborah Whitman.
I I always think of Deborah Whitman because she in continuity she eventually wrote a book after Spider-Man outed himself, saying Peter Parker Spider-Man ruined my life, and I'm like, screw you, Deborah Whitman! How dare you besmirch the good name of Spider-Man? You're a footnote in the novelization of his life. Like I always think of her, and also she was the blonde in the Spider-Man cartoon in the 90s, and I'm like,
they actually put her in a cartoon.
Oh yeah, she's a regular recurring character.
That's impressive. That's a deep cut. I wouldn't have thought that.
Check it out on Disney Plus. It's out there, folks. But yeah, I think we talk about different partners for Peter Parker. Gwen Stacy's one of those key ones. I mean, as you mentioned, as let's see, we have a comment here in chat. Cindy Moon. I think that with Cindy, that's not at all even a partner. That is a hookup by chemical induced.
Yes.
Like that. Even they've admitted
sympathy.
Yeah, they don't like each other. Like they're fine with each other as people, but they don't like each other. But because of the pheromones of the spider
totem,
spider totem. Thank you. Critter Paladin here with a good save. Angelica Jones. I like it. The Mary Jane similarities are fantastic. But yeah, like this is just classic. This is a milestone. This is a true milestone. So it's not marrying a Skrull, but it's up there.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like on these milestones, the further back they go, the more likely they really are to be milestones. It's really hard to tell whether a story of the last 2 years is going to be a milestone.
Yeah, that's very true. Especially with we're in the 92s when these are getting made. Cream Anderson mentions Black Cat. Absolutely, she is definitely one of the key points of the three. And this is just as
she would be the number 3 Spider-Man girlfriend.
Yeah. In the Ultimate Universe, though, I definitely have a strong argument for Kitty Pryde, because that is in the Ultimate Universe, that is a great relationship. I definitely.
Dude, that's because we all imagine Spider-Man. Spider-Man is the everyman. Spider-Man is the hero that we would be if we were a thing. And really, who doesn't want to date Kitty Pryde?
Very true.
Fair enough.
Very, very true.
So it's sort of like all our fanboy dreams coming true.
Yeah. And it's just another Peter on the notch belt of Kitty Pryde.
That's right.
You know, Peter Rasputin, Peter Parker, Peter Quill. I mean, Pete Wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey, I'm not saying they're all winners. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I like Pete Wisdom, but
depending on who's writing him, depending on who's writing Pete Wisdom.
Yeah, the problem is it was Warren Ellis who created Pete Wisdom, and if you look back at it, knowing what we know about Warren Ellis, Pete Wisdom becomes really frickin' creepy.
Yeah. But is he power creep though? Is that his alternate identity? Is power creep?
No, he's a little too creepy for power creep.
Oh,
plus he was never the Herald of Galactus.
Fair enough. Next milestone we have is the fall of Kingpin. I didn't read Daredevil in this time frame, and I just get my Daredevil knowledge from outside sources like the Netflix series and what Daredevil does with other superheroes. So, gentlemen, please.
So this story, the one that they're citing as Fall of the Kingpin, is not really a milestone story. If you want to look at your big Kingpin stories, you're looking at, the Frank Miller Daredevil or Daredevil Born Again. This was just sort of a step along the way. And if it had actually been the final fall of the Kingpin, it may have been a milestone, but he keeps coming back like repeatedly. That would be like saying, oh, well, the milestone is the death of, the Green Goblin. Well, yeah, okay, maybe.
Which
thought
one?
it was. Yeah, exactly. Maybe you thought it was a milestone, but then he keeps coming back. So really, is it a milestone? Is it his fall? It really isn't. So it doesn't end up holding up.
Yeah. Victor, I'm guessing you don't have too much to add for this one.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. So, that's not right. Okay, we have a little bit of an error in the show, but not the same error we had earlier. Oh, heavens, you got to be kidding me. All right, we're going to quickly change this up because there's at least one more card here that we need to work on. Let me drop
$1.99.
this.
Ken
Yeah,
didn't do his homework.
No, I didn't. I did. I forgot. I lost a slide in all the craziness. I lost a
See,
slide.
this was the secret. Like when you didn't finish a paper, like if you couldn't finish a paper on time for your class, what you'd do is you'd write, like, say you needed to hand in like a 12-page paper and you only wrote like 6 pages of it. You write 6 pages, you run off the thing, you staple them together with a bunch of empty sheets, and then you tear off the last couple so it looks like they got ripped off. And then they're like, well, you handed in this paper, but it was missing the last couple of pages. But by that point, you've had like 2 or 3 days to finish it. So you come back in and you're like, oh, here are the other missing pages. There you go. And you had like 3 extra days to finish your paper.
Here's the beautiful thing. I just realized I did do it. It's just out of order. So I just had to skip one because the next one was one of the best cards in the set. But here we have one of the bigger milestones was The Wedding of Spider-Man and Mary Jane by Paul Ryan, which oddly enough, like this is one of the things where it's like, I think because of the timing, it's a milestone, but I would have thought.
I think it's still a milestone. And because the marriage lasted pretty long and because the way the marriage got zorched basically was so bad that people still look and go, hey, this was an important story.
Yeah. My main point was going to be that the wedding of the Reed Richards and Sue Storm was a far more, I thought that was a bigger milestone because there you had in the crowd at the wedding.
Definitely that was a bigger milestone in Marvel Comics.
Yeah. But I mean, I appreciate this one. And also during this time period, there was an actual wedding in Shea Stadium where they did a publicity stunt where they had the marriage. And so it's like, that's a pretty big milestone. The fact that they're like, no, we're just going to actually have the wedding. And it's before
they actually had, I think it was Willie Smith, who was a dress designer, designed the dress and made the actual dress.
It was one of the last projects he did before he passed.
Yeah, before he passed away.
And so it's definitely a milestone. Just one of those things where I'm like, if I was to choose a milestone wedding, it would have been the Fantastic Four because of like in the art of that page, they had a bunch of different characters. They put real life people in there. That I thought was a much grander event.
And that marriage has been a keystone of the series. I mean, Peter being married to Mary Jane was incidental to the series, but the series was still about Peter. And in Fantastic Four, Reed and Sue being married is so key to the dynamic of the book.
Yeah. But yeah. And so that's why I appreciate this one, but I think a different choice could have held more gravitas. But yeah, but I also love the art. I love it's John Romita. So I mean, you can't really, not this art, but the original comic art is John Romita. This is a Paul Ryan piece, but I really dig it. But that's my take.
And they actually did it in the comic strip, the syndicated strip. They did it at the same time.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Reading that.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, and that brings us to card 200.
The best card in the series. The best card in the series. Just keeps you
Double-sided.
organized. Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to jump.
Honestly, the only card in the series that has every character in the series on it.
Fair enough.
Why is half of it landscape and half of it portrait, though?
The intern was not thinking things through that day, but also the back of, I think the back of every card is landscape, as opposed to the fronts, which can be landscape or portrait. So as we went as we went through the series, some would be set up this way, and then some you would have like this. But the backs of every card are always landscape, regardless of whether the card is portrait.
Yeah, I just feel like I would have made the front side portrait too, but there's the anal retentive part of me.
Hey, trust me, this set drives me crazy in little ways of like, I would want every 9 cards, because I picture the majority of trading card sets would go into 9-page pockets in a binder.
Right.
And so I want every 9 cards to be set for that. So if you're gonna do the heroes, you're gonna do them in sets of 9. If you're gonna
That's how they did it on the DC Cosmic cards.
That's true. They also did that with that with the number of sets.
3. They do runs of 3 or runs of 9.
Yeah. I was going through that set. It's very much similar to the X-Men set, X-Men Series 2, where they do some great team shots that way. They really break it up and change the visual aspects quite a bit. I didn't want to jump. Oh, sir, go ahead.
I was just going to say, talking about the 9-page grid where they did, I don't know if you remember the old Plasm set.
I want to say we've looked at it because we've looked at a lot of different stuff, but
there was Warriors of these now, I want to say, was it Defiant? It wasn't Defiant. It was after Jim Shooter had done so yeah, it was Defiant was the company, and he basically put out a set of cards that when you put them into the 9-pocket dividers, actually made the comic with a 9-panel grid.
Oh, I do remember this.
Yeah. And there were 2 sets of it. There was Warriors of Plasm, and the other was called Dark Dominion. And it was one of the few things that I actually bought a freaking box of because I wanted to get the damn comic to read. And you can only read the comic if you got the whole full set of cards.
That sounds awesome, and also frustrating if you're like, I'm missing 2 cards. Where are they?
Yeah.
A whole panel in the middle of the page you can't finish.
I'm jumping back a bit because we did this real quick. Critter Paladin's mentioning that is true supervillain level thinking. I'm sorry, we should have that connected that to something. I apologize. Mary Jane and Peter hadn't even acknowledged that they were more than friends for very long before this. Yeah, that was definitely another thing too. Is like their romance was up and down. And
well, this is very much like what they ended up doing with the Superman wedding, which is that in the comics they were not really together, but in the comic strip, which Stan Lee was writing, they had been together, and he wanted to do it basically in the strip, and so they rushed it through in the comic book to match up so that they could do it at the same time. And like with the Superman wedding, basically when Superman got engaged to Lois, like it went on and on. They went through Death of Superman, and they just kept delaying it, and basically because they wanted it to sync up with New Adventures of Lois and Clark.
Yeah.
And so they had basically like broken them up like a month before they finally got the go ahead, and they had to like rush them back together to get to the wedding.
Yep. Critter Paladin also mentions, but in the comics at the time, Peter was in the black costume. Yeah, I mean, but they wanted to go with an iconic costume, so they went back to the blue and red. So I get it.
He was in the alternating period, actually.
Oh, okay.
There was a period after he had gotten rid of the symbiote costume, the symbiote black costume. There was a period where sometimes he wore the red and blue, and sometimes he wore a cloth version of the black. And he sort of alternated back and forth between them for a while until the first Venom story, which took place after the wedding. And basically after Venom terrorized Mary Jane, he's like, I'm not wearing that costume anymore.
Yeah, it freaked her out. She's like, no. So yeah. One thing we aren't going to get into in this set is the holograms. I have them, but I had a printer die, by the way, in the middle of all this. So trying to get something else up and running was definitely a bit of a question. And then seeing if they would scan, I didn't have the time to do that. But there's 5 holograms out there: Hulk, Thing, Wolverine, Venom, and Ghost Rider. Check them out. I think the Venom's Ron Lim. Sam Keith does the Hulk. The Thing, I don't know who did the Thing, but yeah, they're good. the Ghost Rider, it might be Mark Texieri. I'd recommend that. Victor?
That's almost exactly the new FF.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that. Because you got Wolverine. Venom's the sub in for
Venom
Spider-Man.
as the sub for Spider-Man, yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. We are big fans of the Art Adams new FF. It's a fantastic run.
Yes.
Yeah. Victor, anything else about the checklist?
See, I think the checklist doesn't really hold up with the rest of Marvel continuity. I mean, sure, it was a checklist for this set, but is it really a checklist that we can go back to over and over again for all our other sets? No, I don't think so.
No, but I mean, where else are you going to learn that Zarko is just after Thanos? You got to know where Zarko is.
Zarko is in the next century.
So, everyone, that is the end of Marvel Universe Series 3. We ran a little bit long today. We're sorry for the bit of a challenges we've had technically, but I'm glad we were able to get it back on the ball and keep rolling. We're stepping away from cards for a bit, not necessarily fully. We're just kind of realigning what our next bit of plans are going to be. And Victor and I have mentioned it before, and we're kind of going a little more in depth into what our plans would be, because we're moving forward into What If comics. We want to just kind of touch on some of our favorite alternate stories, things that just kind of clicked for us back when we were first reading. Stories like What If Silver Surfer possessed the Infinity Gauntlet? What if Phoenix had not died? What if Spider-Man had not married Mary Jane? A lot of these we read because it was just kind of a fun alternate story. We're two readers who love what if stories and also alternate storylines. So you have stuff like Exiles, where they're jumping between worlds that are completely different each time and trying to write it. We're big fans of shows like Sliders or God, my brain just shut down, and it's Ziggy should be tapping the buttons to tell me the name of the show.
Quantum Leap.
Thank you. I can remember Ziggy. I can't remember Quantum Leap. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stick exclusively to Marvel titles, because we've got alternate timeline variations for a wide variety of publishers. We've got Elseworlds for DC. We have Star Wars Infinities for Dark Horse's Star Wars line. We have deviations for the IDW Ghostbusters, Transformers, and
Turtles, My Little
Turtles.
Pony. Basically, any title that they did a deviation for.
Yeah. And one of the first stories we're going to try and tackle is Spider-Man versus Wolverine. This was one of our, if you saw our post this week, our art that we used to have for our picks of the week at Comics and Toys was Victor dressed up as Wolverine and me dressed up as Spider-Man. And it was a connecting cover, so we could be together if we wanted and put the picks there. And this is what you got. So yeah, this is what we're trying to get into from here on out. We're still going to come back to trading cards. We're still going to be having creators on each show, and we're going to try and keep to the same schedule, but bringing you just a different content. And
are you going to talk about how this totally blew up the Hobgoblin issue?
Blew up the Hobgoblin issue?
Yeah, the Spider-Man versus Wolverine totally messed up the Hobgoblin storyline.
I hadn't thought about that, but I think someone might have to be back for an episode.
I will tell you the many tales of Spider-Man versus Wolverine behind the scenes.
I would love that, actually.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what our plans are. We're definitely trying to keep the content coming and keep everyone entertained and try and put out stuff that we love. We definitely want to have everyone who's joined us in chat throughout this whole run of Marvel Universe cards stick around, because we're going to have more content, more stories talking about comics, and that's really what we love to do. So yeah, apparently Kareem Anderson says nobody cares about the Hobgoblin.
We've disproved that this entire podcast. We spent, 12 minutes talking about Demo Goblin?
But yeah, so that's the plan there. Doug, thank you for joining us. I hope everyone had a great time. Yeah. Everyone in chat, thank you for sticking around. Victor, is there anywhere you want to point people to check out stuff from you?
Yeah, there's nothing. Check us out every time we have a new episode. Keep following Comic Banter on Instagram. Can't recommend any current books right now. Nothing standing out. Was it the Ten of Swords is fluctuating between, oh, that's cool, and this is annoying. I don't know if I want to recommend that right now. But yeah, thank you guys for tuning in, checking us out, joining in the fun discussions that we're having. Just keep on following us, keep on checking us out. And again, Doug, thank you for joining us. I love that.
Thanks for having me. Call on me again. I'll be more than happy to take over when you all disappear once more.
I'm glad Tony got the snap under wraps pretty quickly this time. It wasn't a 5-year gap. He didn't have another kid that he wanted to save, and he's like, no, let's just stop him now. Take the gauntlet. Doug, where can anyone find you on the internet for anything that you're looking to promote?
You can still look at my old stuff at chimericaltales.com, which someday will be updated again. And that's pretty much the best of my stuff right now.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everyone in chat. I do see people are signing off. Kareem Anderson saying, thanks, Doug. Thanks, Victor and Ken. Thank you very much for joining us. Electric Power Drill, thank you, guys. Patrick saying thank you. And thanks, Doug, from Critter Paladin. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Thank you for your patience through this episode. I hope you guys had a great time, and you keep tuning in for more comic banter. I don't know how to turn this off.